All right, Joel, we've got the Owen Hart tournament in full force, but I think what we're going to be talking about most, well, I don't know, there's a few things, but MJF and Will Ospreay. Some hints at a match to come, Ospreay coming to the aid of Danny Garcia, but also sort of MJF when the Gates of Agony were attacking them. And then they ended up in a stare down, which to me is a hint that that match is going to happen sometime this summer. Decode what you saw there for me. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, right now they've been really big into hyping a lot of matches that are coming down the road. And certainly Osprey versus MJF is one of the absolute biggest matches that AEW can put on at this point. So I think definitely they're signaling that this could be something big that's going to be at the All In show. They still have some business to finish up at with Forbidden Door, with Osprey going for the world title against Swerve Strickland, and then they announced MJF is going against Hechicero in a very unique match for MJF at this point. But I'm certainly thinking that at this point that they're probably looking to have somebody else going up against Swerve. I'm not sure who it's going to be. Don't know who that wild card spot is going to be for the Owen Hart tournament. So it's hard to predict exactly who's going to be in that world championship match. But I think they're definitely signaling to you that Will Ospreay versus MJF is another major match that would certainly fit right in with the rest of that super card.
Yeah. So I haven't, I mean, the show just ended. So I'm trying to digest all the scenarios for when MJF versus Osprey could happen and under what circumstances. So you talked a bit about it. We have they have they showed the brackets for the Owen tournament. Jeff Jarrett, by the way, in the tournament. At first I was like, what? And then I'm like, oh, that's right. He was close with Owen. So because otherwise, Jarrett doesn't belong in that, with all due respect to Jarrett, given the high stakes. So the Owen tournament includes Claudio against Pac, Danielson, and Pac is advanced in the main event tonight. And then Danielson against Shingo Takagi. That's a left bracket. So probably Danielson, Pac. Then Ray Phoenix and Jay Lethal. I would hope Ray Phoenix wins that one, but I mean,
Jay White.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. That makes a lot more sense. So actually, that's good. Jay White or Ray Phoenix will then face the winner of Jeff Jarrett versus the wild card, who they did not announce. So it's impossible to predict then who's going to win the right bracket, not knowing the wild card. Ray Phoenix is not going to win the tournament. Jay White might. Do you feel safe in saying that?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, with what they've been doing with Ray Phoenix, I don't see him having a chance winning this. Jay White, sure, but I still don't think that Tony sees him at that level. Yeah. But I think that wild card is really going to change things when we find out who that is.
Yeah, I still like that. When I say I don't mean predict, put my money on it. I just like the idea of Danielson winning the tournament. I like that being a real showcase match for him if this is the end of him as a full-time wrestler and a world title contender. What do you think of that compared to other options?
Yeah, I mean, I like Danielson in that world championship match. I mean, that is something that fans have been clamoring for ever since he came to AEW, is that they want to see him in high-profile matches. And especially being in Wembley Stadium, that he's going to deliver at a very high level there. But, like I said, that wild card is definitely in play as well. And the person that I've been thinking about for that is, someone like Hangman Page coming back at some point, affiliating himself with the Elite, getting that inserted there by the EVPs. And I could see the Swerve against Hangman as another potential big match for that show.
What about, and again, I'm processing all the options, Okada or MJF in that wild card spot? Do either of those make sense based on happenings tonight or just the lay of the land in general?
I mean, right now it just looks like, based on this bracket, is that what a lot of us had predicted is that they're keeping out those who already have championships, that it seems like they're almost disqualified from competing for another title at this point. Yeah. So I just don't see Okada, but sure, MJF is somebody else. But as I mentioned, I think it's more likely, just based on what they did tonight, is that they're leading you in the direction of wanting to see something else for both those wrestlers than them going into the world title picture.
Edward Slade X says wild card will either be MJF or the loser of Osprey and Swerve, or Drew, since he quit WWE. Let's not leave out Drew McIntyre as a possibility.
Sure.
No, that is not going to happen. However, Bandy Jacobs says could be Ricochet. Don't know the exact date of Ricochet's expiration date. So that could be tough. But that would make sense not advertising him if they're thinking about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, fun. So yeah, we'd love to hear from the chat room, and we got some video callers in the waiting room who are going to be joining us, and they can introduce or interject their theories and thoughts. Like I said, I from a big picture standpoint, I didn't think tonight's Dynamite, like in terms of watching what happened, gave us an above average amount to talk about. They gave us some stuff, but it wasn't like this blockbuster show. But the brackets, the MJF Osprey interaction, there was like they actually gave us like news, some stuff, some grit to kind of process, digest, speculate about. So in terms of big segments, big matches, kind of in the mid-range show. But seeing the brackets and then MJF being out there with Osprey and seeing Pac win. I mean, there's a good amount for us to kind of dig into tonight.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. Especially with having that tournament out there. I mean, there's a lot to say with that still is that, it's going to come with some of the disappointment of just, we want to see the top guys wanting to vie for that championship at the biggest show of the year. And, you have Jeff Jarrett, who has the connection to Owen Hart. You got Ray Phoenix, Jay White, people who are not really seen at the way top of the card. So there is, I think, going to be a little bit of disappointment there, but I think that the women's side of the bracket definitely pulled through on this one.
Yep. Overall on the show, Derek Hubbard, who'll be joining us as a video caller soon, says quite a bit of good wrestling, but with the exception of the Swerve Osprey promo, not much to build excitement for Forbidden Door. Looks like a show I will probably skip. We still got one more week on that. What, Joel, do you think about we can touch on that. Then move on to our video callers and other stuff. But what do you think overall, kind of macro, of the hype for Forbidden Door at this point? I mean, Hechicero, and I don't know. I mean, it feels like a semi-random assortment of matches that's going to appeal to a specialty audience, and then Swerve and Osprey. I mean, that's kind of, I think, where we stand at this point.
Yeah, I think so. I think that they've done a good job building up this whole storyline between Toni Storm, Mariah May, and Mina Shirakawa. They put a lot of time into that, trying to introduce this audience into Mina. And certainly they're building something there with which direction that Mariah is going to go. After this match with Mina saying that you need to choose a side, and Mariah has been leaning towards Mina. So that's definitely a storyline if you like that section of things on the card. That they've been putting a lot into. But otherwise, you're right. I mean, we haven't seen a ton of the CMLL wrestlers, a ton of the stuff from New Japan, but there are, those nice the novelty matches that they put on the card. Like they announced that towards the end of the show that you're going to get Shingo against Danielson, which is a first round tournament match. It's going to be on the pay-per-view. You also have Zack Sabre Jr. versus Orange Cassidy. And so they've already mixed it up a couple times in the ring. So you know that that's going to be some good stuff. But otherwise, I mean, they're really selling this show on the world championship match between Swerve and Will Ospreay. And I think that both those guys have done an excellent job really trying to build this up and make it mean something really special.
And you talk about like Zack Sabre Jr. and Orange Cassidy, and I think that falls in the realm of specialty match. I mean, he's Zack Sabre Jr. has been around. Obviously, he's a well-known name to the AEW audience, but it's a Forbidden Door type match. It's somebody walking through the door from somewhere else to have a match. Naito against Moxley, same thing. Takagi against Danielson, same thing. Even Vakir versus Monet is not a real AW centric match, although they're trying to catch you up on. If you're not familiar with Stephanie Vakir, then you're catching up now. So yeah, I mean, just from if you're trying to expand beyond the normal buy rate for an AEW pay-per-view, I don't think this is a show that expands upon it unless you're really into Swerve and Ospreay. But that said, and as a concept, again, the New Japan not being what it was a couple of years ago hurts just this as a concept show. And so it's a lot of CMLL. There's some Japanese talent, but it is just a assortment of specialty matches. It'll be good, but yeah, to me, I do think we're going to see some people who are skipping this because now they're noticing on their bill a lot more AEW pay-per-view $50 price points on their credit card. And to me, unless you really need to see Ospreay and Strickland, which I think a lot of people want to see that. Otherwise, I think there's going to be a segment of the audience that isn't super excited about really the rest of this card. I guess a ladder match, some people are going to be into that, and it's all AEW people, but Mark Briscoe's not going to win it. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
It's like Leo Rush probably is. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they go somewhere different with the TNT title, but it is just a TNT title, and it's not exactly top tier, all top tier talent. It seems more like, Jack Perry would be the favorite. So anyway, that's just kind of, we got another week to go. We'll talk about it next week. But with that being brought up in the chat room, it doesn't feel like a blockbuster Forbidden Door to me. It's very top heavy in terms of trying to build, in terms of trying to draw a bigger audience than those who already are familiar with Takagi and Naito and Zack Sabre Jr. and Shirakawa.
Yeah, and I think there is some disappointment from the fan base too, as far as where is the Young Bucks and Okada going to fall on the card here? Especially with those guys coming from New Japan, that's where they got their name. And now having this partnership between the two promotions. And it just, at this point, it seems like the Young Bucks now they have a title match set up with the Acclaimed at some point, and that's certainly not something that I want to see at the pay-per-view. Not something I'm looking forward to seeing again at this point, but you would be hoping for something bigger for both of them.
Yep. All right. We have Faustian Bargain says, not an impressive Forbidden Door card. The main event has my interest, but nothing else on it has me excited. It's a pretty big main event, but what else is selling this thing? Adam Kidd in the chat room says, not getting my money. Dougie Dog says, I'm skipping this one too. It's hard to justify $50 in this economy for the fourth night of good AEW matches in a single week. So chat room, jumping in, kind of underlining my point in terms of this, but they got another week to go. And frankly, a pretty strong collision lineup on Saturday, which we'll get into with MJF in appearing, Okada in a match. I wish they had done more than just throw graphics up at the end of the show, hyping a stronger than average collision this weekend. All right. Okay.
Yeah. Excuse me. Did they announce who Okada was going up against? I missed those graphics at the end for Collision.
Yeah. So Okada is in a elimination, or he's against Ultimo Guerrero.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah. So in action, but not a pay-per-view match.
Yeah.
A lot of build. Yeah. All right. Let's pause. Let's just formally introduce ourselves here. This is the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show for Wednesday, June 19th, 2024. I am Wade Keller, host of the show, the editor, publisher, and founder of Pro Wrestling Torch, which started and continues as a weekly newsletter, both in paper copy. I have it right here. What's this? Got to have a prop. Latest issue went to press with the results of the Clash at the Castle. So if you're not getting the paper copy, you're missing out on Greg Parks' column reviewing Dave Penzer's new book. That's a newsletter exclusive. Other cool stuff in that issue. As a VIP member, you also can read the issue in text format and PDF format. So I encourage everybody to go VIP, pwtorch.com/go-VIP. If you aren't a member, pause the screen and check it out and sign up. Also, the website, pwtorch.com. And I am the host of a lot of podcasts and YouTube videos now. And I appreciate you choosing to listen to us and watch us, depending on whether you have downloaded the podcast or are listening to listen to us, or are watching and listening to us on our live YouTube show or on demand on YouTube. Search PW Torch on YouTube. If you aren't yet consuming our YouTube content, Greg Parks and I did a 12-minute hot take yesterday, looking at the possibility that Drew McIntyre is coming across to some people as a babyface in what's going on with in the CM Punk feud, with CM Punk ruining a world title match due to his vendetta. He's got some reasons to have a vendetta, but a low blow in a world title match at the top of in the main event of a PLE might be a breaking point for some people. So Greg Parks and I discussed that. There is discussion going on in the comments area that I participated in. So I encourage everybody who is also into WWE or CM Punk and Drew McIntyre, check that out if you haven't yet. YouTube.com/PWTorch. We are live right after Dynamite on Wednesday night for this post show. We're going to bring some video callers on. That is a VIP and Patreon supporter exclusive. So if you are listening to us or watching us live on YouTube, you can go find the code to join us in the waiting room and be a video caller tonight. That code is at the top and bottom of my Dynamite TV report at pwtorch.com. Actually, for VIP members, pwtorchvip.com. I'll clarify. It is not on the free site. It's on the VIP site. Or if you're a Patreon supporter, we did put up a post with that link also. So you're invited to join us and participate in the show. It's cool. It's a cool benefit of being a Patreon supporter or VIP member. Patreon.com/pwtorchvip if you're interested in taking that route to show support for us. Get ad-free versions of all our shows and also VIP podcasts, depending on what tier you choose, and also access to our weekly newsletter, PDF and all text, and back issues. So lots of benefits. All the details on all that. pwtorch.com/govip gives you the full overview. You can also email us, by the way, if you want to participate in tonight's show. The email address is wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. That's wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. We'll be checking the inbox and getting to that as the show progresses. The other voice and face you've seen so far, if you're watching us on YouTube on the post show, is Joel Dehnel. He is a longtime PW Torch contributor, a longtime co-host here on the Dynamite post show, especially going back to the very beginning. We're approaching 5 years of doing Dynamite post shows, which is pretty cool. I know. And he is the co-star of the All Elite Conversation Club, which is part of the PW Torch Daily Cast lineup. That is one of our several podcast feeds that are free. We do content on YouTube, but the majority of our content remains podcast exclusive. And if you want to subscribe for free to the PW Torch Daily Cast lineup, just search PW Torch on your podcast app or go to pwtorchdailycast.com to see the lineup. Joel, welcome to the PW Torch YouTube channel. Good to talk to you on camera for the first time here.
Yeah, this is really cool, Wade. This is the first time I've ever done like a streaming setup on YouTube or anything live like this. So I went out and bought myself a bunch of new equipment. I got a new camera, I got a new microphone here. So I hope it's paying off, and I hope it looks and sounds good on here. So this is an exciting step to take for PW Torch, because you mentioned that we've been talking about this since 2019 when they first started Dynamite. I mean, those years have just flown by. It does not feel like 5 years. And then even more so than that when I was covering Lucha Underground and did some other stuff for the Torch. So it's been a fun adventure. So.
Yes. So talk about the All Elite Conversation Club briefly, just to let kind of people know what your, the weekly show that you're part of, that's part of the PW Torch Daily Cast lineup.
Yeah, so myself and Greg Canner, we do the All Elite Conversation Club podcast, where, of course, we're talking about AEW. Greg and I, we watch all of the AEW shows. We're consuming a ton of that content, and we're looking at all the news, going through more in depth of Dynamite, of all the things that we liked and didn't like. Greg is the author of the Hits and Misses column for Dynamite on the PW Torch website. So it's fun to just get into that and kind of the banter we have back and forth. It's fun that I'm from Minnesota and Greg is from Detroit, and we've just built this camaraderie of going back and forth of our sports and our takes on AEW when we got into wrestling. So it's just a really fun dynamic to listen to two really different eras of watching wrestling.
Very good. Okay. So, again, search PW Torch. If you're not subscribing to the PW Torch Daily Cast lineup, you're missing so much cool stuff. A different show with a different focus every night of the week. It's all free. So, again, just search PW Torch and go for it. Okay, let's shift to more in-depth analysis of Dynamite. We're going to go to Derek Hubbard first, and then Rude Dog will be on deck, and then Joe from New York will be third, just letting kind of people know how to prepare in terms of the order we'll be going to people. So we'll start with Derek. Derek, welcome to the show once again. What do you think about tonight's Dynamite? What's on your mind? And I think you're muted, by the way. I don't think I can unmute you. I cannot.
Derek.
Is this me?
Yep, that's you. Now we can hear you.
Oh, okay, good.
You're on. Cool.
Well, just to comment about what you guys mentioned about Forbidden Door and to give some more backstory to my comment is, I think what I'm really noticing with AEW, and it was on display tonight, is how much better the wrestling is than WWE, because that's what they're going for, but how little my interest is for anything they're doing on their show. And I think that's highlighted by Forbidden Door. And I think one of the big issues I see is now that WWE's got their storytelling in line, the phrase dream matches is just getting an eye roll from me, because that's not enough to get me interested to dish out $50 to see good wrestling matches that are deemed dream matches. Tell a story is what makes it a dream match, because that makes it important. And with the exception of Swerve versus Ospreay, I don't think any of the matches on Forbidden Door feel important to me whatsoever, or the fact that if the winner is in jeopardy, that's going to change the outlook of the show on a week-to-week basis. So in other words, it seems very inconsequential to me. So do you guys agree with that, or would you push back against that?
Joel, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this Forbidden Door show, as it has felt, the past couple of years, is it's not like it's not canon. It just almost feels like it's the side quest of these novelty matches, of stuff where it's marketed towards the sickos, the people who are watching Stardom and who are watching New Japan and all of the other stuff that's out there, and just wanting to see some unique matchups. I mean, like, who is really getting all that excited about MJF versus Hechicero? I think a lot of people who are listening to this podcast, watching this YouTube, are probably pretty interested to see what that's going to look like, the novelty, the uniqueness of those two different styles. A lot of people have just been introduced to Hechicero, over the past few months when they've integrated CMLL. But as far as like the story of that, I mean, MJF's going to get his win, move on, and go do something against Ospreay. So it just doesn't have that same consequences that you bring up, Derek, just outside of the two main that we talked about at the top of the show, which is the AEW Women's World Title match that they built a lot into what's going to happen between Toni Storm, Mariah, and Mina Shirakawa, and the AEW World Championship match. Those are really the only things that are huge on this show.
Yeah, Derek, what do you have to say to that? I think Joel summarized kind of where you're coming from and kind of where I'm coming from too, in terms of my thoughts on this.
Yeah, well, I guess my big comment to that is that enough? I mean, I think it was enough when WWE was not on their game and their storytelling was more of a negative in drawing your interest towards the product rather than a positive. But now when your main competitor is getting the talking points, the intrigue with just basic storytelling, and your main product line is good wrestling. I saw lots of good wrestling today. I mean, their show is not lacking on good wrestling.
Right.
And so good wrestling versus different personalities, that might be enough for some fans. But for me, it was enough 3 years ago. It's not enough right now. And I think if that's what they're going for the sickos, if I was in charge, and obviously I'm not because I'm not a billionaire's son, but I would think to myself, I need something more if I want to compete or draw new fans into a product where the fan base is dwindling, not growing.
So what is Ospreay and Swerve doing for you, Derek? Is that like even anything close to a tipping point to get you to be into the show, or not even close?
It's the closest thing on the card by leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
And I think it's what I brought up initially. And you guys correct me if I'm different, but that match feels important. Like if there is a title change or whoever wins or whoever loses, that seems like that's a big deal. Yeah. And I even go back towards the beginning of the year, and people like to put together these silly match of the year lists, and I'm sure Ospreay and Danielson will be on it. But no matter how good that match was, it didn't feel important. Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns felt like you can't miss that match. Yeah. It's so important. And I think the only thing on Forbidden Door that has any semblance of importance is Swerve versus Ospreay for many of the reasons that you've highlighted over the last 3 weeks, Wade. I think you've done a great job of talking about the shortcomings of the announcers, adding importance to the context of the match, which is being left up to the competitors, where it would be so much better if it could be highlighted, reinforced, and dressed up by the entire promotion, not just the wrestlers.
Yeah, Joel, what did you think about the segment with Ospreay and Swerve tonight? I thought there were some good aspects to it for sure, and a couple weak points. One thing that stuck out, and I'll talk about what I liked in a moment. But what I didn't like is Swerve going, well, if I lose, I've got other things, and you don't, Ospreay.
Yeah.
Like, what? You're the world champion. It almost came across like Swerve was going, I'm going to lose, but I don't care. And the match hasn't even happened yet. And he's like, I got my business, my music, my act, all this other stuff. And Ospreay, if I beat you, you'll have nothing. If Swerve loses, I'm going to remember that line or that part of the promo, which was him just going, well, you might beat me, but it's not the end of the world for me if I lose. And I want the world champion to feel like it's the end of the world for him if he loses. So that was like for sure the main negative for me, is I just didn't know where that came from. It felt sort of irrelevant. Like I don't know. I mean, yes, Ospreay is a wrestler and Swerve is a multi, faceted entertainer. So Joel, did that jump out to you?
Yeah, I mean, Swerve put a lot of emphasis as far as he was saying, like he's a businessman, the mogul, he's a podcaster, he's doing all of these other things, whereas Ospreay just really put most of the emphasis on the wrestling, and Ospreay really addressed that when he said the line of, "While you had a hit row, I had a hit list, and I hit every one of them." So I just felt like Ospreay was just really just hitting all those points through there, talking about the different moves that he's going to hit, what he's going to do specifically in that match. And he talks about if he's going to use the Tiger Driver 91, that he's not going to be able to walk out of the arena. So I thought that Ospreay just really was hitting it hard, whereas you saw Swerve doing a little bit more of the throwback, where he's trying to make it personal against Ospreay, trying to twist that knife a little bit more, where he starts talking about Alex Windsor and his son, by calling her Al instead of Alex, as if he's close to her. And then at the end of it, Will says that he doesn't want to make this personal. You have Prince Nana then interfering with this and saying that you need to save all that fire for the Forbidden Door show. And then I just like Will, just his brash personality with it, yelling that, when they say whose house, he just says, this is my house. And then Swerve, comes back and says, send my regards to Al and Harry, and Will gets in his face. And so, there's aspects, like you were saying, with Swerve, that he's kind of talking about, almost kind of dipping into some of that stuff we see with Mercedes Moné, where it's talking about like almost this other like superstardom that can almost breed some resentment from the audience, and we haven't seen the audience rejecting Swerve at this point, but certainly I thought that more people were behind Ospreay than Swerve during this promo and when they came out in this. And I thought that Ospreay definitely won the war of words on the microphone.
Yeah, I thought Swerve leaned heel a little bit, but not in a way that's going to make people who are Swerve fans ashamed to be Swerve fans. I think you can rationalize, hey, Swerve's just playing mind games, and Ospreay seems like a bit like he didn't go far in bringing up his wife and son. He just brought him up. So Ospreay was overreacting a bit. And I think, I think it was Tony Schiavone who said, maybe it was Taz who said, maybe they both did, but that it was good for Swerve to push that button on Ospreay. And so I think what you're thinking from a strategy standpoint with Ospreay is, with Swerve, is he knows Ospreay is sensitive about his family being mentioned. And when he figured that out, he went back to it. And it's like, let's get him off his game. Let's get him thinking this is a grudge match as opposed to retaining his title. But I think Swerve fans would go like, oh, that's a good strategy. And he didn't cross any line. He didn't say, oh, your wife's going to, come live with me or something. It's like he didn't, he didn't insult his son. He just brought them up. So I didn't, Swerve leaned heel, but just slightly leaned. And because he pushed the issue, bringing up the family when Ospreay said not. But I actually thought that was well done. I think they walked that line of, if you want to just like both guys and watch it and not have a strong desire to see one beat the other, I think they left those fans alone well enough. But if you're a Swerve fan, you go, yeah, that's my guy. He's playing head games. And if you're an Ospreay fan, you're like, shut that guy up. He shouldn't bring up your family when you told him not to. So I think they hit a lot of points pretty effectively.
Yeah, it was interesting too that to have Swerve kind of go against the family, because that was a big part of the Christian Cage feud, where Christian Cage actually smashed that picture frame across Swerve, and that was kind of a big selling point going into that match.
Yeah. Before I go back to you, Derek, I was going to bring something else up from that. Something that I've been talking about, and Derek, when you talked about how I've been talking about what should be what the announcer should say and how the wrestlers had to do it, one thing jumped out to me early in the Swerve Ospreay segment, which was Swerve saying that they've traveled different roads the last 5 years, and that has been specifically what I think the announcer should be talking about, because I think the story of this match, it can be, Swerve pushed Ospreay's button, whatever they talked about in this promo and what you think going in. But a big part is just make it about the world title and Swerve trying to legitimize himself. This is his first pay-per-view main event as champion. And Swerve, I think, should, and there's only a next week to do it, but show a little vulnerability at a point going, this match is important to me, even though I have other things going on. If I lose and Ospreay, you don't, which was, I didn't like that point. But if I lose, are people going to see me as a transitional champion? Or are people going to think that I had enough wins for this to rank in the realm of MJF and Moxley and Jericho and Hangman and Omega? Talk about the history and lineage of that title, and have Swerve say this match is important because you are an international, highly acclaimed star, and you have been on AEW, so many AEW fans' radars with outstanding matches, and like you said, holding titles on all kinds of continents for years and years. And I've worked my way up step by step, and now I'm at the top, and I don't want to give this up easily because I haven't been at the top very long. I want to hear that from him and the announcers. And Ospreay has a different approach, which is this is his chance to establish, what Jason Tatum is establishing, which is
legacy.
I have been a top guy for years, but I didn't win the ultimate championship until I beat you, Swerve. I'm going to be Jason Tatum, a great player who's almost gotten there, but not quite. And so I just think there's opportunity there to not go to me, oh, you brought up my family and now I'm mad. I mean, you can do that. I'm not like totally against it, but they've got meat on the bone here in terms of the two stories. And when Swerve brought that up, I was like, okay, now we're going somewhere. And I thought they steered away from it a little too soon. And then it went to, if I lose, I don't care because I'm an entertainer and I got all these other things to do. So I ended up disappointed in it. But when I say they're still next week, I don't think you can have Swerve and Ospreay just stand in the ring and go back and forth again. But maybe sit down interviews with Renee. Maybe it's just a story the announcers tell. But I still think that's the selling point to get this to that Cody Roman level of this is historically significant. It's not just a personal feud with some petty back and forth words. This is going to determine the rest of AEW summer. Some big matches coming out. Own tournament winner facing the winner. Two big pay-per-views coming up at Wembley and Chicago. Like, get into that. And I think they're leaving that on the table right now. Derek, I'll throw back to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, and overall, I like the segment because of the passion that was on display with both guys. But I do have some of the same complaints you had, is when Swerve was going off on he does this and that, my counter to him was, your rap is terrible. I've never heard you on a podcast, and I have no idea what else you do. I care about you because you're a pro wrestler and because you're a pretty good pro wrestler. But if you can't beat Will Ospreay, and you're not as good as he is, I care about you less. And I thought Will Ospreay's passion was really what was the driving force in the promo segment. And I don't mind the going personal road, but it does feel a little bit of a least common denominator. We don't have anything else to say, and we're not creative enough to tell a unique story, so we're going to go back to this. And to me, I just wish and hope they had something else to build
We lost Derek's connection, but we got what he was saying. Bandit Jacobs said, nah, sounded more like Will has to win because wrestling is all he has. And I just say, Joel, that is what that's not disagreeing. That's agreeing with me.
Mm-hmm.
That's precisely my criticism is I want Swerve to say, I need to win because if I don't, my title reign might be. I mean, he could say, well, I don't know if the plan is for him to lose. He might not want to put it this bluntly, but if I lose, my title reign is going to be at the bottom. It's going to be below Samoa Joe. It's going to be below MJF. It's going to be below Kenny Omega and Hang.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just put it out there. Like, I need to. Like, I have other things I can do. I'm not going to be lost, but I scratched and clawed and worked my way up to this level for the last 5 years, while everyone was talking about Will Ospreay as what company in America is he going to be the world champion of? I have a chance to make a statement and stop that from happening. And we're just not getting that. And now I believe, Will has to win because that's all he has. Well, that's not a selling point for a match because it's Swerve basically conceding, I'm against somebody who's hungrier than me. I think that's how the average person is going to read that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you make a big point here that's like, I want Swerve to be talking more about his legacy as the champion and what that means and what that direction, what's that domino effect going to look like for the rest of the promotion? Because we're already starting to talk about All In. We're talking about the Owen Hart Cup tournament.
Yep.
We need to have more of how is that going to affect one another? And the announcers need to do a better job of telling that story of how all these things affect one another and what opportunities other people are going to have. But certainly, I think that Swerve is in a difficult spot because he did spend a lot of his time trying to reach the championship by going through Hangman Adam Page. And they probably just don't want him talking about him at this point because by all reports and speculation is that Hangman is going to be returning at some point soon. So he probably doesn't want to be saying that name and putting that back into people's heads at this point. But I assume that he's going to be realigning himself with the Elite, whether it's the wild card spot or the Blood and Guts event that's going to be later in July. So, it's at this point, I mean, it's, I don't know if Swerve knows kind of what direction they're going to be going in at this point. But he's just in a spot right now where he's not establishing himself and what it would mean for him to hold on to that championship. And he's just, it almost feels like he's kind of resorting to the fact of, maybe, he held the championship for a shorter period of time. And he's just going to move on and do some other stuff instead of how hard he worked to get this point. And he's not going anywhere after Forbidden Door.
Yep. All right, Fred. Again, if you're joining us in progress and you are a VIP member or a Patreon supporter, the code to join us as a video caller is available in my TV report at pwtorchvip.com. You need to be a VIP member to have the username and password to get to that ad-free website with that code. And if you're a Patreon supporter, you can go to Patreon. Our latest post, or one of them, includes the code to jump on in and be a video caller. If you're listening to us on our podcast feed or on delay on YouTube, consider that an invite for upcoming SmackDown, Raw, and Dynamites. We'd love to hear and see you as part of the program, a carryover from our many years doing post shows audio only on Blog Talk Radio. We shifted away less than a month ago to this YouTube format, and it's been a blast. And it's been great getting to talk with some of our regulars, but on video. Speaking of which, Rude Dog Hendrick from Portland joins us now. Welcome, Hendrick. Do you want to be Rude Dog or Hendrick? I know your handle, it says Rude Dog, but what should I refer to you as? I'll try to remember.
Let's stick with Rude Dog. Why the heck
that
not?
That works. It's your call. So Rude Dog, what stood out on Dynamite tonight for you? Good to see you.
Well, nice to see you too, Wade and Joel. Nice to talk to you. But Wade, your bitch meter had to have been set off at least
it's busted
3 times today.
Yep.
Like
how many times did you count?
I heard at least 3.
Yeah, I heard it. I typed reset the bitchometer 3 times. So for the uninitiated, I think the word bitch is overused as an insult. I think it's just trite and cliche and overdone, and it just comes across lame. And so I gave Sora Strickland a free pass. I think he just says it right in the right context with the right tone. Let him do it. It's still going to reset the bitch-o-meter, but I'm not going to like protest it if he does. Although I think he's cool enough to not keep going to it. And now we got an Okada T-shirt. That's what does it say? Shut
Not
up,
going
bitches.
anywhere.
Yeah. Doesn't mean he has to keep saying it.
He's going
But yeah. So we had 3 times I had to reset the bitch. I'm just hoping to go 3 weeks of Raw, Dynamite, SmackDown, and Collision without the word bitch being used as an insult by anybody sometime this year, and it is not looking good after tonight. Yeah, I don't think we got 45 minutes before we had to reset it 3 times during the show.
Well, I know when Okada came in, you're like, push him to the moon, make him like the top guy in AEW. And now he's just goofing around, like saying bitch and like doing jokes with the Young Bucks. So what do you think about Okada so far in AEW?
I don't hate it, but it's not like, my idea was Okada on his own isn't going to dazzle people like Ospreay or have the kind of unhinged intensity of Rouge or whatever. There's people who just jump off the screen when you see him. And he's more Nick Bockwinkel, Ric Flair, all-time great of his generation in big, long matches. But if you watch him do a squash match, it's like, what's the big deal with this guy? Like, you have to be like one of the cool kids to know how good he was because you were watching New Japan Super shows and seeing his title reigns against, having these epic matches against legends. And he's not physically imposing, as MJF rather needlessly and gratuitously pointed out. And he's not English. He's not going to, cut Ric Flair promos. That's not. So what do you do? So my argument with him is just wrap the entire promotional machinery around him and treat him like royalty and have everybody talk about him as the biggest deal and the huge signing. I think that's the only way to really get your money's worth out of him. And instead, he's become, he's not Tozawa along with Otis and Maxine and Chad Gable. He's doing comedy, but there is some gravitas to it. And I think he can still be useful and valuable, but they have turned him into a guy who's doing comedy with the Young Bucks. He's doing, joking around. I don't think it's the end of the world. I think he's actually kind of good at it. But it's not enough to turn, and we have people in the chat room saying it, the people who aren't initiated on a lot of the talent on the non-AEW side of Forbidden Door matchups, they're still waiting to see what the big deal is about Okada. And having him do comedy as sort of a sidekick backstage to the Bucks, I think doesn't limit him from eventually becoming a one of the centerpiece attractions, having great matches who people go, wow, okay, now I see what this guy's about. I watched him on a pay-per-view. Now I want to see every match he does on pay-per-view. That can still happen with this. But it is a step down from what I thought was the path to maximizing what Okada could mean. But you have to protect him and have him just be serious, and having him, have a t-shirt with bitch on it in a sports car and cutting off Max Caster, it's less than maximizing him as a star, but it's incorporating him into the show in a way where I think they can feel that he's entertaining and amusing. Joel, what do you think of what Rudog brings up?
Yeah, I mean, what you said with that, Wade, that's my thoughts exactly, is that I feel that he is entertaining. He's good at doing this stuff. Bitch is now going to be his thing, to get that over. It's on a t-shirt. And I think that, they enjoy, they think that that's funny. And I think he likes what he's doing, as something different, a departure from the character and being relied upon to carry the promotion in the big matches in Japan. But certainly, you'd hope that there's a lot more hunger from Okada at this point to still want to, carry a promotion in America and get to that top spot at some point and compete and hold on to that world title for an extended period of time and get over a bunch of younger guys. You mentioned too that it's like he is like the Ric Flair, Nick Bockwinkel. And it's like certainly he could use a lot more Nick Bockwinkel in this character. That I have liked the direction of wanting to bring him in as a heel, but the execution of it as kind of doing a lot more haha stuff with backstage hijinks of cutting the legs off of other people is certainly not the best use of him. I mean, not even by a long shot. And Tony Khan is aware of that as well. So I think at some point they're going to try to get him to an elevated level, but you hope that it would still have the same impact had they brought him in and treated him like he was this great, legendary, all-time generational wrestler that he is. And you wonder if it is going to have an effect when they do try and push him into that position.
Yeah. Ben Jacobs says tonight's Okada segment ended really close on the wrong side of Goofy. The whole thing did get decent heat after cutting off Max Caster's rap. Rude Dog, back to you.
Okay, well, I'll switch to a different subject. Mariah May, she's really impressed me coming into AEW. I watched some of her stuff in Stardom, but not a whole lot. And they've had a slow build with her, like, you know, doing some good matches, but not really talking a lot. And this was the first time you got to hear her talk quite a bit. And she really carried herself very well, in my opinion. And her matches have been great, and she has a great aesthetic. I just want to know what you think about her and which way she's going to go at Forbidden Door with her different options.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in that realm of Mariah May and Toni Storm, and sure, and then now they've got the 6-woman tag advertised for Collision with Saray and her team. Joel, what do you think of Mariah May and Rude Dog's question? The segment tonight. How she did on the microphone, and where you think the dynamic is heading.
I think that Mariah, since she's come in, she's really excelled in her performances, especially in the ring, that she's proved herself to be in that real top tier of women's workers within AEW. And she definitely has a very bright future being one of their top stars on that side of things. But as of the direction they're going right now, is certainly there's this kind of, they're like Toni Storm and between Toni and Mariah and Mina, they're kind of playing this, risque type of story of, of almost this love triangle type of things. But, they're saying it's more of a friendship, but certainly, they're getting close to each other's chests, and there's been kisses and all that kind of stuff that I think all of them are enjoying playing into that aspect to do something different on the card. But Mariah has been certainly leaning more in the direction of being more closer to Mina because they have that connection with each other, and it's almost like Toni has become old news, and you can tell that story that Toni is kind of seen as that has-been star, the person who had their time in the spotlight, and now Mariah is going to something new, which is old from her partnership in Stardom, but new as far as the AEW audience and what they've been doing in this storyline. So I think at some point it is heading to a breakup because people want to see Toni Storm in that in a babyface position, and they've been constantly fighting that, where sometimes it seems that sometimes she's presented as a heel and sometimes she's a babyface. And I think that the logical way to put this is to have Toni Storm in a position where she can just be cheered and fans can embrace her. And I think that Mariah could definitely embrace more of a heel character going up against her at some point.
Yeah, I like what's going on. I think there's maybe a little too much going on, and some of it is happening on Rampage and Collision when it comes to the dynamic with everybody. The little smooch with Shirakawa and May, it wasn't like it didn't seem like crossing any line, but they've walked up to that line before this. I still just I totally agree. I think in the end what we want is Toni Storm as a babyface, and I think there's a lot of moving parts. I just think I want them to tell the story on Dynamite proper, so that when there is a payoff to all this, the people who are watching Dynamite every week really understand who all these personalities are and react. Not the ones who are flying out to go to the pay-per-views in person, but that everybody feels invested in the eventual outcome of this. This is not at the level of what Judgment Day is doing with Liv and Dominic and Finn Balor and all that. It's just, it's not at that level. They haven't invested the necessary time and creative skits, interactions, all of that. But if you're paying really close attention and watching all of Dynamite, I think there's quite a bit here that will lead to when they resolve where Mariah May ends up, with people being invested in, Mariah May against Toni Storm or wherever they end up going. I think they've gotten enough TV time that people know that they're a big deal. But mostly just in the end, I think Toni Storm remains a star for this company, whether she has a title or not. Her using her wit to go after heels is the landing place. And whether that's with May by her side or May turning on her, more likely, that I think that's a good spot to end up in. So, Rude Dog, back to you. What do you think about Joel and I said?
Well, I hope the turn comes at Forbidden Door. I mean, I don't think you need to drag it out much longer. And yeah, that would be the perfect opportunity to be to lead to Toni Storm versus Mariah May. So I hope that's what happens. Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot of talent here. Let me ask, what do you think about Joel, what they've done with Mina Shirakawa, and the vignette tonight? I think somebody in the chat room, maybe it was email, I was scanning over those, said that the vignette was good tonight. It was weird. I put in my report at pwtorch.com on Dynamite. I said that Shirakawa and her ring entrance is coming across, and I can't believe this crossed my mind, as a cross between Dawn Marie and ECW and Disco Inferno. Her ring entrance is a combination of those two things. And if you go back and watch Dawn Marie's ECW ring entrances, there's a lot of Dawn Marie there, but there's also some Disco Inferno with her mannerisms and all that. So she's distinct, and I think, I mean, I don't want to color your guys' answers. She's distinct, and they're leading in on it. They're shining a light on her being a distinct personality. So Joel, what have you thought of how they presented her at this point?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what they've been trying to do, is show you more of that personality. I saw her wrestle for the first time in person when I went to that Windy City Riot show, and it was all about showing off that personality and interacting with the crowd, and a lot of comedy spots that she did, but people just ate it up, and they loved it. And so she's trying to be, obviously English isn't their first language. And I thought that she did a really good job trying to get through that promo, and convey what she needed to, through that. But, by giving her more exposure on TV and having Mariah May to play off of, I think that we've gotten a good sense as to who she is, the history of it. I thought last week they had a really good video package explaining who she is. To where I think, this storyline may not be for everybody. It still has its holes in it. But I think that they've done a good job to get me invested into this. I think other people, where I mentioned that, I think that this is one of the bigger matches on the show, because they've gotten these personalities over, and it's been a long told story to this point.
How do you grade the story that they told and the way that they said it? Because, like I said, I don't think it's at like Liv, Dom, Finn Balor, Judgment Day.
No.
But how short how did it deserve more time, or do you think they gave it enough time? And what do you think would have helped get it closer to a level where we're more praising it? Because I say that because I don't even necessarily have an answer, other than I think there's just been some things that haven't been on Dynamite that they've emphasized or recapped enough. But on this one, I don't really have an answer, other than I do feel like they're not getting everything they could out of this.
Sure. Yeah, I think they put a lot of time into this. I mean, amongst all three of their shows, where Mariah's had matches on Rampage, they've had other segments onto Collision, trying to continue this on. I mean, they push this as a major program and a major story. As you said, it's hard to find what more they could have done, because sure, it's not nearly at the level of the stuff that they've done with Dominic and Rhea Ripley, with that type of kind of soap opera level stuff. Whereas WWE is that's more of their bread and butter as to what they do. They're able to tell those stories really well. And AEW has tried to dip into it with this. Could they have more backstage segments? Sure. They could have some other stuff to try and tell more backstory outside of just what happens in the ring and doing promos in front of the crowd, which is always going to have that slant because of people really enjoy the fun and the wittiness of Tony Storm. And so, it's going to be pulled in that type of direction versus if there was more stuff that didn't have that audience reaction and they could tell it the way that they wanted to. But it's hard to put my finger on exactly what could have ascended this to that next level.
Rude Dog, back to you. Anything else you want to add before we move on?
Well, did you pick a side Mariah's going to be on after Forbidden Door?
And she will not be on Tony Storm's side.
Okay.
I think they'll feud. Yeah, I thought I said I think the latter, but it wasn't. I didn't emphasize it too much. But yeah, that's where I think they're going. But I'm not against having a little unexpected twist. And Mariah may go against what I think have been the expectations from the beginning and stay with Tony Storm as a babyface duo either. But so I'm not ruling that out. But yeah, I lean towards Mariah May versus Tony Storm, with Storm being a babyface. Joel.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm thinking for the All In show. I believe they're both from the UK, so that it just makes sense to have that as a major match on that show.
Yeah, cool. Anything else, Rude?
All right, one last thing.
All right.
I don't think this match was even brought up at all. Like, I live in actually New Jersey now, pretty close to New York, so I probably will be going to Forbidden Door. But I've learned from you and WrestleTix and whatever that I'm going to wait to the very last minute and get the cheapest seats I can get possible.
Yep.
But Mox versus Naito.
Yep.
Like, did they even bring it up today? Like, that's to me. That's a main event. Like anywhere in my opinion, and I just think it's a crime that they didn't even bother bringing it up today.
Joel, it seems like, when we talk about selling points for this pay-per-view and how to get the buy rate to a level beyond just the core people. I'm not going to go into the sickos thing as the go-to phrase. Myself, people, but I'm not. But the kind of the core ardent international AEW audience. Beyond that, I mean, they're not even getting them excited about this match any more than they would be just from seeing it announced. And it's weird, Moxley being kind of in a different place. In a way, it might be good to kind of keep Moxley out of the mix until he decides to really be in the top AEW mix. But what do you think about what they're doing and really not doing in terms of hyping this match at this point with only one Dynamite to go?
Yeah, at this point, you've just had Jon Moxley talking about this match. You have not heard from Naito. You haven't seen him coming to any of the AEW shows leading up to the Forbidden Door. So, of course, there's still next week where you could have Naito maybe in the United States, and they could have a stare down there. But you just haven't done a good job. We talk about what are the big selling points for people who are not watching all of these wrestling products to get them excited about wanting to see Moxley versus Naito. Who did already have their match, earlier this year in April, where Moxley did win the title from Naito at the Windy City Riot show. And you just really haven't done a good job, establishing that it's a big deal that you're getting Naito for his first singles match in AEW, and who has been a major star for New Japan and has been the guy carrying it since AEW rated much of their talent, over this last year, and he's been the one who's been depended upon. So as far as like the people who are not following everything, I mean, it's just kind of you hear this Naito guy. I mean, he looks interesting. You put the graphic up there, but there's not a lot much else to the selling point other than, here's a match that Moxley's going to be in, Moxley, he's great in everything that he does. So here's just another great thing on the card. It's definitely has not been built up as one of the top matches, even though, it will be, close to the top of one of the, I would assume one of the last three matches on the show.
But yeah, it's not in the conversation. Rude Dog's right in terms of going, is this a match that can get people who aren't just automatically going to buy Forbidden Door until it lets them down? Have they done anything to get those people? And the answer is no. Now they still got next week. Tony Khan cares about ratings. Viewership numbers have not been good for Dynamite. I mean, it's all relative to other things on cable and all that. And they were against an NBA Finals last week, but they still had fewer viewers than NXT. That is, the third brand for WWE. I don't care what excuse you have. If your A show of AEW is losing to the C show of WWE, it's not good. It's not the end of the world. There were special circumstances. I bring all that up because I'm like, Tony Khan just might think we can't have just Jon Moxley every week cut the same promo. And are we going to hold viewers if we start doing a mini documentary to catch people up? Either you know or you don't, but we can't spend time on Dynamite losing viewers while trying to catch them up to caring about this. Now you can say, well, maybe that shouldn't be one of the key matches on a pay-per-view when you're trying to draw a big buy rate if you think talking about it will drive viewers away. So I'm not saying there isn't a way to do it, but I think if you're getting inside Tony Khan's head, he's like, I've got these wrestlers in an arena in front of fans. They can talk English. We can do our thing. And that's his default. That's what he's leaning into at this point is the things that are more comfortable that he thinks are accessible to the wide audience and will not drive away viewers. And maybe that's all there is to it in terms of how little we've seen. And next week, they'll, either collisions in the next two collisions or Dynamite next Wednesday, there'll be more of a push. Rude Dog, appreciate it. Good to see you again. Good to talk to you.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you. Have a great night. Go VIP.
Thank you. Appreciate the plug. Joel, anything you want to add to that? It looked like you might have been about to say something.
No, we can keep moving forward.
All right, cool. So let's go to Joe from New York, our next caller. Joe, welcome. You are audio only, it appears, which is totally fine. Welcome to the show. What's in your mind about Dynamite?
Good evening, guys. To be honest, I haven't watched Dynamite or WWE. I haven't watched WWE since WrestleMania, and I haven't watched Dynamite since December. But I did. The reason I called is I flipped by TBS tonight, and I saw, for like 30 seconds, I saw the Young Bucks entrance. And I stood with that, and I said, this is the problem with this company. These guys came out to the ring, and they were talking about how they're the owners, they're this, and the shirts they were wearing. And I'm like, if they had started with that 5 years ago, maybe more people would know who the Young Bucks are. But I don't think anybody knows the Young Bucks. The people that knew the Young Bucks 5 years ago still know the Young Bucks today, but the new people don't know them. And that's the problem with them because they never grew their base. And to be honest, when I saw the Young Bucks the first time, I said, these guys are smart. They're a better version of the Hardy Boys. But that's all they ever were. And they never showed to me being anything more than that. In the 5 years that they've been on the TV. That's the problem with AEW. They haven't grown, not an inch. They've gone back. They started out at 900,000. They're at 700,000. They don't deserve a TV contract.
So this is a good portal, Joel, into what we saw with the Bucks tonight with the Acclaimed and the presentation of the Bucks and the larger issue of the power struggle. And it felt like that was going to be a big story arc. Now we're in Forbidden Door hype, and they've just largely dropped it. Like, I mean, there'll be a reference to who the bosses are coming out, and the commentators are like, "Oh, I don't see Tony Khan, I don't see Christopher Daniels. That's not the bosses." But they haven't. It's gotten kind of lost in the Forbidden Door hype. I think when Forbidden Door's over, maybe they've got a way to rev it up again. But the Bucks have characters right now that is not just sort of a carryover from PWG, ROH, whatever. It's like there's something distinct about them. Not everybody likes that of the whole array of things you could have done to give the Young Bucks something to do on TV besides look like they didn't really want to be there and they're just waiting to have a good match that someone will give 5 stars to, which is most of the first 4 years of their time in AEW. Not all of it, but most of it. Not everybody loves this gimmick, but it is something like Joe from New York is pointing out, caught his eye, and it's distinct. So talk about kind of tonight, the presentation specifically, but in a macro sense too, what you feel about this stage of the Bucks as characters and the whole power grab segment with Tony Khan, who wasn't going to be at Dynamite, and then now he probably is, but they're not really updating us on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's where do you start with that? Yeah, there's a lot of questions as to where they've dropped off that storyline, and certainly it's taken a step to this over to the side while they're doing the Forbidden Door show, because already the Elite were talking about the blood and guts. They wanted to sell some tickets. That show was going on sale for Nashville, so they've already planted the seed, and it looks like they have their eye set on that, because we don't have anything announced for either the Young Bucks or Okada for Forbidden Door. We just have Jack Perry being involved in the TNT Championship ladder match. So it remains to be seen, if something does get added for them. But certainly at this point, it does not seem that Okada is going to have another match against who's he facing? Ultimo Guerrero at Forbidden Door. I wouldn't expect that. And certainly it does not get me excited to see the Acclaimed against the Young Bucks at the Forbidden Door show either. But the Young Bucks, they got a lot of their acclaim, in their popularity because of their interaction with the fans. They're being the Elite YouTube show. They're just putting on these incredible matches in front of these smaller crowds for the smaller audiences, for Ring of Honor, New Japan, all these other promotions. And I think that a lot of that stuff worked on that smaller scale, that you could get behind kind of those grassroots guys, that they were out there. Dana is making a lot of their merchandise and wanting to sell it for these guys. And now they've been brought into this promotion where they're on TV every single week, and they're having to develop more of a character than these indie guys who are just incredible athletes, great guys, nice people. And I think that they've really struggled to find what that lane is going to be for them, outside of when in the beginning of the promotion on Dynamite, when they kind of had that power struggle with the Elite and had that storyline that led to a great match between Hangman Page and Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, that they haven't really had another storyline for them to get into up until them turning heel and developing those heel characters, and now they've gone into this EVP route of things. So it's good to see that they're trying to develop themselves, and they seem more interested. At times you've said that they look like they're almost disinterested being on the show, because I think that they really needed something to develop and work on, because at a certain point they felt like they've conquered a lot of things. They've had those great matches. They've been in front of those big audiences. They helped start a promotion. And so they needed another challenge. And I think that that's going to be the big thing, for a lot of people, like including Okada, who's done a lot for New Japan, and become that top guy and done everything possible that he could, that they need to keep challenging themselves and finding new characters, but it needs to be productive for the promotion. It needs to not just be having fun doing something and being entertaining, but it needs to be something that's helping to elevate the promotion and get over a lot of other talent. And I think the Young Bucks are trying to do that. Certainly they took the pin from the Acclaim here. But I think that there's there's other things that the Young Bucks could also be doing to help elevate themselves in the promotion.
My problem with this is, if you have a storyline where Tony Khan gets beat up, and the idea is he can't even travel to shows, just do a good job with that story. Is that asking too much? Don't just let it fade away, and have little references off to the side. And in the and then in the course of it, you're introducing Christopher Daniels as a not honorary EVP. What do they call interim EVP? For who? What is he? Is he filling in for Kenny Omega? Is it because Tony Khan can't be there? It's just sloppy. And so it's taken the edge off of the Bucks, the power trip that they're on. If now all their power trip is having Okada push a button and pretend it was accidental to stop Max Caster from rapping, that's the totality of what they're doing with a power, while Tony Khan may or may not still be gone. So I don't mind the Bucks characters. I just want them to do a better job with it.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly it's come we were wondering, what's the follow-up going to be to hitting the Tony Khan driver onto Tony Khan and telling this big story of Tony wearing this neck brace going into the NFL draft. He's going on the Rich Eisen show. He's going all over the place, making his remarks about WWE, being the face of AEW. I mean, just really being the main person out there. And they certainly didn't seem like they had a clear follow-up. That I think it sounded like a good idea at the time to get a lot of attention, to spring forward, the Young Bucks kind of, asserting more of their power, but it hasn't had that clear follow-up as to how Tony Khan is in that equation. I know that he made his return. I can't remember who he drove to the back to the arena a couple of weeks back, and I feel like they felt that maybe that was just the blow off of things of now Tony Khan's back. But certainly you didn't get that explanation that you're looking for watching the show.
Yeah, and the announcers aren't talking about it. Like, well, the Bucks were on a power trip. Tony Khan is back, so the Bucks better watch it. I mean, and they didn't really. It didn't seem like they wanted to bother to really think hard enough to define how the power worked. I mean, they made an attempt at it. The Bucks are like, well, we have an ironclad contracts, and we can, in the absence of Tony, I don't know. I mean, there was something that sort of was like, okay, they're on the right track, and they didn't do it. I don't want to belabor that. I don't want to belabor that point, but it just is a bummer that something as major as what they did to TK, and he's in a neck brace NFL weekend, and now it's just so undefined, and the Bucks are just wrestlers who kind of have a little bit of power, that they have access to a button to cut off Max Caster. Like, that's where we are at this point, and they're not defending their tag team titles, as pointed out tonight, which I mean, that's not great either. Rizilla says Tony Khan has stretched himself too thin. On an episode of Who Killed WCW, Turner's desire for a second show Thunder was universally panned by everyone on that show because of overexposure. Yes. I mean, one of the cool things about how long I've covered this is how many times we've seen things just cycle around and around over and over again. And you can go back and read my initial report in the Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter in the pre-internet era, well, early internet era, on Thunder being launched and all the concerns we had. And there was excitement, but a lot of concerns. And it was panned as a clear B show. And it really, really, really watered down the company in so many ways. And before Eric Bischoff was doing podcasts and talking a lot about this, I did a 4 or 5 hour interview, a Torch Talk interview with him, over 15 years ago now, probably. And he said, the biggest mistake he made was giving in. And he claimed he was resistant to it, but he still regretted giving in to the executives who were like, the ratings are good, we're making money, add more hours. And the 3rd hour Nitro, 2 hours of Thunder. He just said that expansion was absolutely a mistake. It is not up for debate. Thunder might, to the bean counters, have been a short-term boost in revenue, but it really was, I mean, in discussions I've had about what killed WCW, and it's a in vogue topic every few years to go in depth on it, and I don't think anybody's covered it. I mean, my coverage of the WCW, demise of WCW, and the whole buyout situation with WWE was unmatched. It's a great rabbit hole to go down in our back issues of the Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter. It was watering themselves down. It was spreading themselves too thin. So it's not. Tony Khan is spread thin in a lot of ways, and now AEW fans are. The bookers are. The star power is spread thin. When you lose Omega and you've got Darby off and on, and Hangman Page off and on, and Punk leaving. I mean, all that. Even just like losing Ethan Page, and like some of the Sean Spears at one point was gonna, or the old Ty Dillinger. He was going to be like sort of a valuable third tier guy. They've lost enough people. Now they've gained some big names. Obviously, Mercedes Moné, Okada, Ospreay. But even and some have fizzled. Adam Cole obviously has been a disappointment. Miro has never blossomed into what people thought he could be. So if they had taken full advantage of everybody they had, retained everybody from Cody on, and kept Punk and maximized the value of the talent they had, they absolutely could get away with doing 2-hour shows per week and make it must-see TV. But that's not where they are right now. So it is a watered down product, unfortunately. Joel, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I have been an advocate for, I mean, just having less of the programming out there, just because when you have less of it, I mean, it feels more important, and you can tell things that are more concise versus having to stretch them out, and trying to get people to watch all three of these shows. I believe Todd Martin gave on the Fix, maybe it was a week or two ago, said, an ideal scenario would be as if you could just make if you could make Dynamite 3 hours, then you could make Collision just 1 hour. And that's something that I have talked about as well, is that, even though 3 hours does sound exhausting, and it would be exhausting, that if you're committed to having so much of this television, that I think that you could do 3 hours of Dynamite and just tell a more concise programming show, and then just have, one other show, which is more dedicated to the matches, which is what they did initially for Rampage, where it was just more kind of focused on having some showcase matches there, versus now where it's just really the C show with every match is just predictable, with several squash matches within that hour.
Yes.
Where it's even who are you getting over in there, because it's not even the major stars. It's a lot of kind of the mid card, and maybe some people who visit the main events, but it's just not what it had been at one point in time. And certainly it's just it gives off the feeling of just filling out a lot of content.
I do kind of want to kick you out of the show for suggesting Dynamite go 3 hours. I don't think there's any rationalization for a 3-hour wrestling show. I think WWE took them a decade to figure it out, and I think they figured it out. And I do not see the booking, the granular booking quality from Tony Khan to support the elbow grease, the hours, the writing team, the wrestlers who are smart, know their characters, and really can communicate in that way. Tony's built a roster of wrestlers who can have long matches, and we get that on Rampage and especially Collision, and even more so on pay-per-views. We don't have a booker and a roster that can support a 3-hour TV show, and I think it would be devastating for Dynamite if they did that. And I would rather have a 2-hour Collision and 2-hour Dynamite easily. And I disagree with any proposal for 3 hours of Dynamite and as a way to reconfigure Collision. I'm not swayed by that scenario, Joel, no matter how much I respect some of the people who have espoused it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fair. I just look at it from the standpoint of, we have an overrun every single week, and it goes about 10 minutes. So what's another 50 minutes onto the show?
It's devastating. It's devastating. It will ruin. I'm not doing this for effect. It will ruin Dynamite for a lot of people. People do not want to commit to 3-hour wrestling shows every week. They're choosing not to watch Rampage and Collision for a reason. And I just go back to it. Tony Khan, 50 minutes. I mean, first of all, 2 hours, 10 minutes is 10 minutes too long. So stop it. The show's already too long. He's just going to throw meaningless matches out there where you know who the winner is, and they're going to go 12 to 14 minutes. That's what's going to happen. He's not going to do more video packages, or I don't know. Can it be done? Yes, but I would need evidence of an absolute overhaul of the way that they approach booking their shows, because it would take more than twice as much work to add 50 minutes to the show to have the density and quality of character development and storylines and promos, to not have it be what 3 hours of Nitro was to WCW, which was the beginning of the end.
Yeah, to have it just be this overall slog of a show. And I mean, and in the context that Todd did giving it and I'm giving it, is like, if you're committed to having to give so many hours of television, that is one scenario to having to do it. Ideally, like, I would just like to see 2 hours of Dynamite and maybe 1 hour of something else. Like, Rampage is so damaged as a brand at this point. So sure, maybe call it 1 hour of Collision. But I just think that there's so much content to have to keep up with all of this stuff. But largely for most people, the Rampage and Collision shows are skippable for the most part, outside of a couple segments, a couple things get added in there. It just adds a lot more color to what you're seeing on Dynamite. But Dynamite is the strong driver of everything. But certainly, Wade, I mean, I'm not going to disagree with you that a 3-hour wrestling show every week would be exhausting. And I think that you would erode your audience, and people would not want to stay glued to their televisions, especially in this type of world environment where people are watching TikToks and YouTube and Facebook Shorts and stuff, where the attention span is so short that here's a run of things that you don't want to watch. Now you're going to move over. Where to doing something else, maybe not even flipping the channel, but just do something else entirely. Whereas Raw has such a built-in audience from being on for so many years, that it's easier in some ways, because you have the legacy of WWE and the legacy of Raw and the habitual people who are watching that every Monday night, that you could get that at a certain time. But for AEW, certainly, I think if they were to make that move to 3 hours, that you would see overall viewership would totally just crater. So like I said, I'm not advocating for it to become 3 hours, but it is certainly one scenario that if you're committed to having to give all of these hours of wrestling, something that I think that is plausible.
They drew 1.023 million viewers. Wait, let me bring up the right number here. So 3 years ago on June. What's a comparable week here? They drew 878,000 viewers 2 years ago this week. And last week they drew 681,000 viewers. Let's go back 1 year ago. They were at 832,000. 3 years ago, I don't have that for me. So I think I'm just pulling up some numbers from like a year and 2 years ago, because with Collision, I think not only is Collision not doing well, but the existence of Collision has hurt Dynamite already. So if you had a third hour, you're basically doing what Eric Bischoff said was the biggest regret. He told me in a Torch Talk I do. The biggest regret he had is adding a third hour of Nitro and 2 hours of Thunder, just expanding the programming. What Tony Khan needs is I would say to survive and thrive, just cancel Collision and Rampage and put all his effort and all his time into making Dynamite the best show it can be. But I know you're prefacing your framing of it going, if you are committed or forced to or whatever into 5 hours of programming, you would distribute it a certain way. I would still say make your A show something people really look forward to, and don't a certain percent are going to dread or not have the patience, and they're just going to watch clips and not commit to the 2 hours. Grand Finale in the chat room says Collision was a good show when Punk was running it for those few weeks. It felt different from Dynamite, and both shows seemed to be finding their groove. Tony needs to give one of the shows away to a new booker. Not the worst idea. You'd have to find somebody he trusts to do it, and that's a discussion for another day. But Edward Sladex says Tony is very much similar to Vince. Collision isn't significant whether the show is good or bad. It's just not important. Maybe a different night would help. I'm not sure. By the way, thank you, Bandy Jacobs, for super chat. He says, here's 5 to support the Torch. I really enjoyed the John Rizzi interview from the archive earlier this week. Oh yeah, those are fun. John is such a great person to talk wrestling with. I haven't talked to him in a couple years now. I want to check in with him and see how things are going. So thanks for that reminder, Bandy Jacobs. Throw that up on the screen. Okay, so I want to go back to Joe from New York because he's been listening to us. I had him on mute. Joe, do you have any follow-up? I know we went a lot of places there, but do you want to add anything, or did you get what you wanted to say?
Yeah, pretty much. Just to add a little bit. The bloom is definitely off the rose with this Forbidden Door pay-per-view. It's kind of, I think, got to go away for a little while, because the problem is AEW does that all year. It's not special because they book like that all year. They got to get their people to want to be champion. And I'll be honest with you, I think that's a problem in wrestling across the board, even in WWE. Nobody seems to really want to be the champion. I mean, Cody Rhodes, yes, he did, and he won it. But look what they followed up with. You got AJ Styles. That's a guy for 4 years. They had him in the freezer. He's like a bag of vegetables that you took out, a box of vegetables that you had from 3 years ago. All of a sudden, he's in the main event. It's like, I mean, I respect AJ, but they didn't do anything with him for so long that it don't matter no more. And I'm not going to waste my time watching a show where I know that guy ain't going to be in a contender. The main eventers went home after WrestleMania, and that's the problem with wrestling. Look at MJF. A year and a half ago, he kept talking about 2024, the free agency year, right? He spent half the year on the injured list, and he still hasn't wrestled. The companies don't present wrestling in storyline fashion anymore. Everything is a tournament, King of the Ring.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Money in the Bank. It's tournaments. That's not booking. That's tournaments. That's not pro wrestling in America.
Joe, that's a good point. Joe, what do you think about that? That tournaments have become a crutch for Tony Khan, and to a degree, all promoters. Battle Royals was the thing for Tony. Now it's tournaments. You have this tournament with Owen Hart with the brackets. It's how did we decide who's going to be in the Owen tournament? Why not explain that, especially with the prize at the end? So there's that, and I also want to bring up, because Joe brought up MJF, and he actually wrestled. Like he doesn't wrestle a lot, and I want to get into let's make a point, and I think we have emails on it, which we're getting to soon. We're by the way, for people watching, we got Ramen Noodle joining us as an on-site correspondent. He just is in the waiting room, so we'll get to him in a moment. Then we'll go to emails, but on the docket is some MJF talk. But first things first, tournaments, as Joe brings up, is it a crutch? And would you like more definition to why the wrestlers in the Owen tournament are in it? Because frankly, I don't think Jeff Jarrett being a good friend of Owen Hart is justification for Jeff Jarrett being one of 8 wrestlers who has a chance to win a world title match.
Yeah, I mean, just going off of the Owen Hart tournament first. I mean, when you look at the participants in it, it's like the first few people they announced with the vignettes where you got to see Pac, you saw Shingo Takagi. It was starting to look really good. I think that we were, it was definitely like, this is kind of the direction we want to see. Is we want to see some big names. We want to see some surprise names like Shingo, who is at the top of his game in New Japan over there. Yeah, you got to do some explaining of that, but I think that he is definitely a qualified name to be in a tournament that's going for the world title at their biggest show in Wembley. But to just throw a graphic out there, and you have Jeff Jarrett just as a friend, a former tag partner. I get that. That's that's cool that they have that connection. But my goodness, Wade, I looked up the last time that Jeff Jarrett had a singles match on AEW television, and it was in October of last year. So what justification does he have? And if that is the explanation they give, is that he's just a friend of Owen Hart. I mean, that's nice. That's cool that he's in it, but we're trying to make some money, trying to get over this tournament for this big show that's coming on later this year. And you're just putting in Jeff Jarrett, and, on the smaller level, it's like, it's whatever, that he's going to be in it. He's going to lose to whoever the wild card is, and they're going to move on. But if you're going to have these tournaments and these things that you rely upon, you need to build it up to the level where, we had looked at the G1 tournament in New Japan. And for the last few years, it's been kind of disappointing. They put a lot of people in there, and they put some pretty undeserving names in there. So you're not looking forward to so many of those matches. But this year, they shortened it up, the participants, and they made some intrigue into, who's going to fill out those final spots into those last 2 blocks. And that you're going to get a lot of really good matches out of there. And that's what you've come to expect out of the G1 Climax, which is also leading to their biggest show of the year for a shot at the championship at Wrestle Kingdom. So you need to just make more of these tournaments mean something, give a reason as to why people are entering or are able to enter these things, and not just a graphic. You can have tell some more booking there by having some qualifying matches, and you can do something like that. I'm not advocating for bringing back rankings in any sort of way. I just don't think that there's a way to make that work, but I think that you can do something of people qualifying for it. But you're seeing in both major companies that there's an over reliance on having these stipulation events. Like we just saw for AEW, they announced the Blood and Guts show, and they announce it, in advance when there's no storyline reason to announce it at this point, other than your
ticket sales.
Yeah, you're trying to get some ticket sales for that show, for the show in Nashville. And so there's been an over-reliance on the business end of having these destination events, and then just having these tournaments with people who are convenient and who's going to, for the most part, who's going to win and lose in these tournaments. And you're just getting to this destination in the absence of, telling a really dynamic story to get there.
Bandy Jacob says, I don't mind Jeff being in it. Having nothing but top guys makes things seem too convoluted when they have to lose in the earlier rounds. Just disagree across the board. If it's a tournament to get a title shot at a major event, it should be all top guys. And you need to be a brave booker, give away some matches, have finishes, It's not the end of the world. The Boston Celtics lost some basketball games in the regular season. They're the champions, and nobody thinks they're not the best team in the league. Put top guys against each other. People are going to win and lose. Stop being so scared of that, and make your tournaments count, especially when the stakes are more than a trophy. And Tony Khan decided to do that. All right, let's shift to Ramen Noodle. Attended Dynamite tonight. Ramen, welcome. Good to see you. Good to talk to you.
You hear me properly?
We're not hearing you well. Talk a little more.
Sorry, I got that Apple Air.
Oh,
let me see if.
Now you're good.
Switch.
It
Am I good?
Kick.
Okay.
Yep,
Hold it right there.
Yep, you got it. It kicked in. So you're at the show tonight. What stood out to you? I know you were in the chat room saying you're driving home with your daughter, and it sounded like we saw a different show than you did. So obviously, being in person is different. Talk about that.
It is different. Somebody mentioned that in the chat room that having a live experience for the show can a lot of times alter your perspective. That happens to me, like going to football games and basketball games. I'm like, I didn't even know it was that close, or I didn't even know somebody had 100 yards. So it is a little bit difficult to tell. So I'll caveat it with that. And the only thing that I heard when I was coming back was Derek's call. So, and I like Derek. I think I gave him props in the room last week. I know I'm a bit of an AEW stan, but it's like, oh man, it's like it sometimes I listen to the shows on the Torch probably 20 times as much as I go to live shows for any brand. And so a lot of times, like, you can kind of lose the thread a little bit about what's happening at ground level. It seems like I don't know, like everybody's just having a good time. Like, I know that they wish the crowds were bigger, but like nobody there is like, there's too many belts or Daniel Garcia shouldn't be dancing. It's like, that was the most over thing on the show. And I forget sometimes that like, it's okay to just like, I feel bad for liking stuff that like you and the guys on your staff are so good at these criticisms, and they're not wrong. They're absolutely above board, but they matter. Like, I get why Tony Khan seems like he doesn't listen to them, because he's probably so high on his own supply.
Here's the thing. You're totally. There are two categories that I think is really important. You're shining a spotlight on it, which is there's things that are really fun to see in person, but those aren't always what's best for growth or selling pay-per-views. And that's a perspective that's the lens through which we analyze this. Can you go and see a wrestling show that's really entertaining, but in the totality of the TV product, it's counterproductive to growth? And the answer, of course, is yes. Is it buy a ticket and is it fun to see Danny Garcia do a silly dance? Sure. Is that best for the trajectory of him being taken seriously and getting the most out of his career? 100% absolutely not. Does Billy Gunn get a nostalgia pop? Yes. Is it cool to see Billy Gunn in person after going through the Attitude Era? Yeah, but is it good for the Acclaimed? I think it's awful for the Acclaimed. I think their cool factor's gone. I think they look short when they stand next to him. He gloms all the big spots in matches. It's just he's made a career out of bigfooting people. So, I mean, there's things that a live crowd enjoys. You're there, have a good time. My God, of course, don't sit there, and be a curmudgeon. But if you're looking at what's best for business, what's fun in person. And if you're Tony Khan and you're seeing people get a kick out of Billy Gunn, you can be blind to the damage he's doing to how big the Acclaimed could be to a contemporary audience. So I know I know it, in your angst over, feeling guilty over liking certain things when, intellectually, it's wrong, but emotionally it was fun. I totally get that. And I don't, my criticism isn't meant to make people feel guilty for enjoying something. But the things that fans enjoy, and it sounds weird to say it, isn't always the highest level of what the company could be presenting so that even more people would be watching and buying the product. And so anyway, but you're the one at the show. So talk some more about you said Billy Gunn got the biggest pop of the night other than Daniel Garcia's dance.
One of them. It's just, it was just funny to hear. Like, they're chanting, "We want Billy" as the Acclaimed. So you're not wrong. Like, he has stifled their growth because they're chanting, "We want Billy" the entire time. The Acclaimed
it's a nostalgia act. That's big-footing act that could be one of the defining draws of AEW.
For sure, but the Acclaimed was still pretty over. Like, so I've been a big AEW fan since day one, but this was actually my first live show.
Oh wow, that's
And
awesome. Okay, cool.
yeah, for sure. So about maybe about a year and a half ago, I started. I work evenings, so I started watching AEW with my daughter because my daughter at the time was a huge Jade fan, right? And so that kind of got her into wrestling. And so in doing that, I can't come home and watch every wrestling's on every night of the week. So I had to choose a day,
Yeah.
and it's been Dynamite. Then
Yep.
Jade goes to WWE, and she won't watch WWE because she's as tribal as the grown-ups, right? Like,
Oh
she
wow,
won't,
that's amazing.
so
Wow.
she feels like they stole her away. So
Wow.
she keeps tabs on Jade, but she's a big AEW fan now. So I wanted
Mhm.
to take her to a show, and I feel like you only get a one shot at taking a non-fan really to a wrestling show. And
Mhm.
so I got some good seats, and we really enjoyed ourselves. The fans were great. We got into the arena a little bit early. The merch stand was it was again better than I expected after listening to
Wow.
people complain about how bad the merch was. And maybe it was because it was a smaller arena. It was just a little bit of a better experience. And I think that's probably their sweet spot, like an arena the size of that George Mason arena in
Yeah.
Fairfax. Because they did not fill that arena or even come close to filling that arena, but it still felt intimate. Everybody was pretty tight, and they did a lot of crowd work. The matches were exciting, and the people seemed like they were really looking forward to seeing like Tony Khan coming out and saying hi to all the guys, the cameraman and things like that.
Yeah.
It was just a
Yeah.
really kind of cool experience.
So let's talk about the reaction MJF got.
Yeah.
And how did that compare to Swerve Strickland, Will Ospreay, Tony Storm, Cesaro, like just the other people who were featured on the show?
So MJF was behind Ospreay and Swerve. If he wasn't the first act of the night, because he came out again towards the end of the show. It wasn't nearly.
Well, MJF came out for the Roosh match at the top.
No, I know, but I'm saying at the end of the show, he came out for a save. Like, did he come out for a save later?
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah,
his
so
second
he
appearance.
didn't. Yeah, I felt like that was the MJF pop. Like at the top of the show, he got the top of the show pop. Anybody would have got a big pop. Justin Roberts got a bigger pop. Like it's a. So he got the top of the show pop. But that I don't know. Like people were really into MJF. People were very active for the match. People liked Roosh too, though. Like Roosh kind of got a surprising
there were
amount of
chants for
support in
him.
the crowd. Yeah, that was fun to see. He lays it in too.
So from a crowd pop standpoint, it was an ensemble. There's Ospreay, there's Swerve, there's MJF, Billy Gunn, as you said, Danny Garcia's dance
crowd too.
And
Yeah,
what?
like nobody wants to like I heard your discussion that you had earlier in the week. It could be on the Tuesday show that you do, but you're talking about how there's like a lack of heels, right? But even the heels aren't really heels because the crowd seems to be very supportive of the work that everybody's doing. So everybody seems like they're over at the show. So I don't know, except for Don Callis. He popped up for a second, crowd went nuts. People really don't like Don Callis,
I'll slip in a very quick plug. Yesterday, Greg Parks joined me on the flagship. It is not a YouTube show. It's our podcast-only feed. It's our Blue Logo show. Search Wade Keller in your podcast app. Greg Parks and I talked in depth about the return of the Bray Wyatt 6 and the and then a bunch of AEW talk too. That is free. Search Wade Keller in your podcast app. Subscribe. Download the flagship from yesterday. Joel, ask Raman a question about his experience at the show tonight if you got one.
Yeah, Raman. So I want to ask more specifically about the promo between Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland, and just get more of the viewing that live and what the crowd's response to that was, and who they really felt won that exchange between the two, and who it seemed like they were more behind going into that match for Forbidden Door.
Yeah, so Swerve definitely. Both of those guys got fantastic responses. Like people were kind of on fire for that promo. I don't know how it played on TV, but it was one of the hottest moments of the night. But I think Ospreay kind of got him. I don't know if it was designed that way, but it almost seemed like it was designed to give Ospreay a bit of the upper hand after Swerve got the upper hand in last week's exchange, and the crowd definitely kind of felt that. Like so much so, like my daughter's been watching for a year. listen, she's 10 years old, so I wish I could have her next to me so she could kind of tell you herself. But I picked her brain because I would kind of talk to you about this. But like she at that moment was like the crowd's kind of rooting for Osprey here, right? Like why are they rooting for Osprey? I don't understand. But Osprey definitely won the crowd over because he was saying some serious stuff. That like that line that he said about while you had a hit row, I had a hit list. That one was really big with the crowd. People kind of like that. Swerve had some lines, but he did meander a little bit at the end. Like he's talking about, I don't know, he started leaning into like the heel Swerve character. I think that Swerve might just he's just not as mature on the mic as Will Ospreay.
Right.
Like Will Ospreay, I think if he loses an exchange with Swerve, it's because they planned it for Will Ospreay to lose an exchange with Swerve. Like I don't think that Swerve is the MJF type where you can just kind of let him go out there and use whatever comes to his brain and go back and forth. I don't know if that's Swerve's best attribute there. Yeah,
it's interesting to say that because there's concern about Ospreay not being strong enough on the microphone, and Joel, I think he's come through.
Oh yeah,
and to the point where it's not surprising Ramen Noodle is saying that. That you would think Swerve can't hang with Ospreay, but I guarantee you 6 months ago, the majority of people in AEW familiar with both guys would say, well, Swerve's going to have to carry a segment with Ospreay. I think it's a sign that Swerve. I thought Swerve was good tonight, but he's not. He hasn't been great. And MJF, again, took a dig that I don't think he should have at that aspect of it in his return promo. But Ospreay has come through. I know there's people like Frenzias in AEW who are like, I was kind of worried about him on the microphone, and he's like delivering, like he's found a lane in AEW for his character. So yeah, Joel, just briefly talk about what Robin's bringing up about that dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Ospreay has absolutely just shown that he is more than capable of doing things on the microphone. I think what separates Ospreay from a lot of the wrestlers that they brought in is we talked about, in the beginning of the promotion where it's, have guys already had their career and then coming to AEW is kind of their after career, almost like the retirement party of sorts, or is this still part of their building their legacy? And Will Ospreay is one of those guys where this is absolutely, he has taken that momentum from New Japan and he is going to continue ascending towards the top. And I think that's just really what separates him from everybody else, other than his incredible in-ring ability, is that he's showing that passion. He's adding these extra things that make him just feel so much more real on the microphone, where other people can feel performative. There was times listening to Swerve where it is part of his personality, but it did feel more just kind of performance based when he's talking about being the businessman, being the mogul, talking about the family. Whereas the things that Ospreay was saying just felt so much more reality based of wanting to be the champion, the people that he's had to go through, his story, his path that he's taken. And so I think it's just something that people resonate with a lot more versus what Swerve was saying in that promo.
If I might,
yeah, go ahead, Ron. Yep.
Go ahead. No, I in my personal opinion, it's almost like Will Ospreay feels like a natural, right? And many things. I think Will Ospreay feels like a natural in the ring, and I think he understands how to get a crowd to respond to him, both with his physicality and also with his words. Swerve does not seem like a natural. Swerve seems like he's improving. He's working very hard.
Yeah.
He seems maybe like the most motivated person in the company, but Swerve is not a natural, right? And I think that Swerve, the problem with wrestlers like Swerve is that it might be too much work, right? Maybe you don't want to put, maybe like I hear the discussion about maybe you should, you have to make the decision on Ospreay or Swerve. And I commented last week that I don't think it should be a difficult decision for Tony Khan. I think the pros outweigh the cons here. You have to push Swerve in this situation because doing so can hurt him so bad. Like Will Ospreay will be fine. He will be able to beat this, but Swerve not being able to get over Will Ospreay, like it's obvious whether you play whether you write the story so that Swerve is winning on the mic, he's not winning on the mic on Will Ospreay. So he doesn't seem to be the in-ring performer that Will Ospreay is. But if you
Right.
push Swerve and you show that the company is behind him, then you can really bring him up to a certain level that it's going to be very difficult for him to achieve for anything outside of this first championship run.
Mhm.
I
In my
agree with
opinion.
that, but what the danger is are you protecting and propping up somebody who's a B or B plus player when you have a potential A plus player to build around an Osprey? Maybe if you're saying, well, we can't afford to have him lose because that's all he has, maybe the answer is then he should lose because you have better options who can take you to bigger and better places. And I don't have the answer to it, but I'm hearing you talk and I'm thinking, well, that's almost the case against Swerve, that if he loses, it all, the house of cards falls apart, and maybe he isn't going to work hard enough to get good enough. So I don't have the answer. I don't envy Tony Khan's call. I don't think you lose if you go with Osprey because he's really good and young and hungry and all of that. And you can lose Swerve in the process if you do it. And so I get the argument is, why not have both? Use the world title to prop up Swerve above, give him that boost to be an A- main event guy, or so he doesn't fall into B- territory, and use the belt and the machine, to prop him up a little bit and see if he grows into it. Go ahead, Ramen. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's not a meritocracy. This is a scripted TV show where you get to choose who the winners and losers are. And I think that the crowd is more perceptive to that. So having Swerve win some of these exchanges and also putting him over some of the other guys that are naturals really shows that it allows the crowd to feel for Swerve what they feel for Osprey or Omega or some of these other guys who came into the company having already had a company. Give those lend the credibility of the company to supporting that guy. And I don't know, people aren't really talking about this. It doesn't seem like it, but Swerve is their first black champion, right? And
Mhm.
AEW's reputation with the community of wrestling fans, not the people that I was sitting next to at the show, but the people who come into post shows like this and talk and write articles, they're just waiting for AEW to make a misstep, whether legitimate or not. And this is about as legitimate a decision to not go with Swerve or to give him a short run as any company could ever be faced with. But I still think that AEW might want to consider how this is going to be perceived if the first real challenger thrown at Swerve, they have him lose after all of that stuff that they were talking about, how they're different from the 40 years of other companies and how they're, I don't know. They can come off as hypocritical, whether they mean to be or not. I don't know, in my opinion. So I just don't see how Tony Khan could make any decision other than to put Swerve over clean as a whistle.
Interesting. Lady B says, I wish Swerve would talk more about the legacy of being the first black AW world champion, especially on Juneteenth. It's a missed opportunity. Willow brought it up. Swerve didn't. I seem to recall, and Joel, back me up, or Ramen, back me up. Didn't Swerve say in some context he doesn't want that to be his thing? He doesn't want to talk about being the first black AW world champion. Like, he wants to be the world champion. He doesn't want that role, which is interesting. It's his prerogative. People don't have to like it if they think, hey, the history of the sport, the history of the world and this country, my God, you got to step up and, it's your responsibility to do it. People can have that opinion, but I seem to recall him saying he didn't want to do that. Do either of you, and jump in if either of you remember that?
I know that he thought it was a big deal to win the championship and be the first black champion, but I don't recall seeing something or hearing him mention, not wanting that to be part of the main identity for him moving forward as champion.
Yeah.
I remember him talking about, there was that black wrestler, 50 top black wrestler list a couple of years ago, and he got some pushback from saying that he didn't want, forgive me if I don't have this completely accurate, but I think he got some pushback from saying that he didn't want to be classified as a black wrestler because he's a wrestler and he thought it was limiting, which is not an uncommon line of thought for black entertainers not wanting to be looked at as black entertainers. But he got a lot of pushback from the black wrestling community about that. So again, this is a test also for Swerve. And Swerve, it felt like he doubled and tripled down after he won the belt to kind of, throw the fist in the air. And it seemed like it was Juneteenth, the day that he won the belt, when he was, the way he was talking about it. So it seems like maybe he was pushing, to kind of correct a little bit of that narrative.
Okay.
And maybe it seemed to me that it was a little overt and it was a little strong. So maybe he's slowing it down a little bit. So
Well, yeah,
again,
in a way,
he seems
maybe
like he listens a lot to try. He's a try hard. He seems like he's always trying to do something and change the narrative. He's probably listening right now.
And he might have wanted to have the moment and acknowledge, especially in the face of the criticism that you talk about. But then he's like, okay, now I'm a wrestler. I'm not going to be the black wrestler. I don't want everyone tuning in on Juneteenth and going, oh, I want to see Swerve give an inspirational speech. And I mean, in that, it absolutely is his prerogative, but it's also the prerogative of others to say, hey, you're missing an opportunity here to make a difference, and here's my case. So I'm not going to take a stand on that. That's a very personal decision on his part, but it does seem like it is a decision. I will acknowledge it when I win the title, and then let's move on with me being a wrestler. But yeah. So anyway, I think you want anything more to that, Roman?
No. I don't. I would just. Okay. Everybody always does that. They say no points, and then they say no more points.
Yeah, they do. No, that's okay.
I got my wings, I guess. But so the one more point is, I'll say that it feels like AEW to me, as far as the two major wrestling companies and their employees, seem like they are much more affected when the narrative changes one way or another. So I kind of understand the wrestlers tiptoeing around how they're perceived and how much support they show for the company and how little support they show for the company, how much it seems like they're extra sensitive to criticisms, because when the narrative changes on AEW, it affects them. It affects the amount of people that are in the stadium. It affects how much the pay-per-views buy. I feel like the audience is a much smarter audience. I feel like there's a water level that WWE can afford to get to where they can. I mean, they ignored the fans' criticisms openly and honestly in the ring and storyline for many, many years while they were bad. And now that they're very good, they've gotten better, but they never had the crowd that I saw at Dynamite tonight, and I think a lot of that is because the people who would buy a ticket for this show hear the discourse about the show, about how it's second place and they don't want to go. And you're never going to have that with WWE. I know that you pointed out earlier in the evening about, the way you guys discuss criticisms of wrestling companies is within, the thought in mind of what's the best thing you can do to continue your business and to draw money. And as a fan, we're not looking at that as much as, that's why I listen to you guys, because I'm not as smart to do that. I just kind of want to see a show that I enjoy. I guess I'm one of the sickos that want to see that. And you say that, just because someone pops for something, it's not good. But I feel like on the other hand, if maybe you get away from what wrestling is, like there are people that criticize AEW for having too much wrestling when it's wrestling, like a wrestling storyline is never going to be as good as a television show storyline. And everybody that watches these shows in this country have been watching one show for so long. They're almost WWE pilled, where you think that you can't enjoy a wrestling show if it has too much wrestling. And I think that's much more corrosive for the business of professional wrestling, getting away from wrestling being a factor than
I think the main criticism of AEW is people want wrestling matches where they don't know the outcome. And when you do put two people against each other where you don't know the outcome, that they get the most out of it they can, because it doesn't look like an overwhelmed, spread thin booker through talented wrestlers on the show to present a dream match to an audience who already knows who they are, but it's a smaller audience than it could be if more time, effort, and a stronger staff and more elbow grease, more thought, more effort. I mean, the amount of time that goes into, one or two WWE segments on Raw is probably equal to the entirety of the time and effort that goes into Collision, Rampage, and Dynamite. Now, wrestling doesn't need to be that meticulously micro booked, but like the bloodline segments, like that is stuff they thought about. The people in it on camera and off camera thought about that all week. They exchanged texts. They sat down for hours at TV. They thought of every camera angle, every little twitch. When is Solo Sikoa going to cross his arms? When is Jimmy Uso going to look down versus up at what line? Everything is mapped out. And then you get rewarded for watching it 3-4 times back to catch every little subtlety. And so when you say say there's too much wrestling, what I hear is there's too much wrestling I don't care about, because there's no shortage of good wrestling. What I want is good wrestling where I know the stakes are high. And then you get into the whole idea of almost everybody who walks out on Dynamite, I'm exaggerating slightly, but sometimes it's actually true, has a belt. So like, Will Ospreay comes out and goes, I'm going to be world, or no, I think Shivani said in 11 days, he might be world champion. I'm like, he's international champion. Tell me why it matters to be world champion. And then you've got so I don't want to push back super hard on what you're saying, but it's the main criticism. Some people criticize it. Yeah, there's too much wrestling. There should be more other stuff. The main criticism I hear is I want the wrestling that's good to be in a context that gets me invested in who wins and who loses and the stakes and the ongoing storyline of match outcomes mattering and being unpredictable more often than they are.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you do that really with a show with no off season that's on for 52 weeks of the year. I mean,
it takes more work than they put in. That's the answer. Yeah. They need more staff, and they need more attention to detail, and they need to put more time into it. I mean, Tony Khan loves good wrestling, and he's like, Bryan Danielson against this guy. This would be great. Yes, it is great for, the sickos, if that's going to be our term. But he wants to grow. He wants more money for his TV deal, and you can't just put Danielson against somebody that 80% of his audience has never seen and 40% to 60% have never heard of. You put in the work, build them up. I could praise the Shirakawa push earlier in the show because they're actually putting work into it. We're seeing her personality come across in vignettes. We're seeing her get mic time where clearly thought has been put into it. They're not running from it because English is her second language. So they can do it. People want to see more of it. It's about getting that next layer of fans. And of course, I can't say second million anymore because my God, they just want to get back to 1 million. But that phrase is, 3 years past its freshness date. Joel, you've been listening to us for a while. I want to jump in somewhat briefly, and then we'll go back to Ramen. And I want to hear from Ramen about Tony Khan in front of the fans before he goes. And I know he said he was tired coming into this, so we won't keep him too long. But Joel, first, your thoughts on what we've been talking about?
Yeah, I mean, the just going off of, I could pick any of those things, but certainly, just the criticism of AEW is that, I mean, there's just so much content out there, and the stakes are just, you're going to see some good matches, and so everyone says I can see good matches anywhere. I can go to any promotion. And, we live in this world now where you can get on any sort of streaming service, anything on the internet, and go find some great matches. I mean, there's great stuff happening in Japan right now. There's stuff happening in Mexico, and I don't have the time to catch up on it because there's just all these things. There's so much content that's out there, but you got to give me a reason as to why I need to see this. And the stakes need to be high for it. And why WWE is exceeding right now is because they have raised the stakes on these things to where people are really interested. I've made the point before of, it's like, why is Star Wars not been able to do something to get the fans back and to get something really excited, or Marvel? It's because you've raised the stakes so high. There's really nothing else that you can do within there. Sure, you can tell some fun little stories, but you're not going to be able to get that same fan investment. Whereas with professional sports, with pro wrestling, you have the world title, which is the highest stakes, and you have to keep building it up that way that everyone is vying for this. And as you talked about before, Wade, what does that mean for everyone else? What does that mean for the direction of the promotion? What does that mean for the business and potential matchups down the road? Yeah. Don't be like afraid and wanting this moment like we had tonight with Will Ospreay and MJF, which was a good moment because we haven't seen MJF for a long time, that they haven't interacted with each other. But you can still plant these ideas and heads and fans' minds of this potential matchup down the road. You could look forward to seeing this person. What's going to happen when they come back? You know, instead of just always wanting that big pop of, oh, we can't talk about Hangman right now because he may be coming up pretty soon here. You know, and I don't know that for sure, but certainly it gives off that feeling, and it's handicapping Swerve in a lot of ways to talk about what his story and what he's done over the last year. Going against him. So both of you guys are right, where it's just we need to be always raising the stakes, and everybody plays a hand in that, which is Tony Khan as the booker, you know, wanting to create creative stories where the matches have stakes, and you talk about, you know, what does this mean for the winner, but also what it means for the loser. You know, are we not going to see them for a while? Does that loser go on to you know, do they go to another promotion for a while to go build up some wins, create an identity for themselves, and then they can come back? I just think that, you know, that there's a lot of different options, that it just feels like they've found this groove, and they're just kind of, you know, still in the same gear of things, of just, you know, hey, we're gonna build up these, we have these super show events where we're gonna put on some really great matches on here, but otherwise from the week to week shows, I mean, it's going to be, you know, you're going to get some angles in there. We're going to tell some stories, but otherwise it's just going to be some good matches with not a ton of stakes attached to them.
Yeah.
Yep. Roman, you can respond to that if you want, or jump to my question, which is, how was Tony Khan in front of the crowd tonight?
He's awful. He's a no.
Charmingly, delightfully awful.
Again, I've been an AEW apologist because I root for the underdog. What can I say?
Sure.
So I've always felt like, man, they're being so mean to Tony Khan. Like, he's just a guy who loves wrestling, and like, he can't be that awkward. Like, you can't get mad at him because he's not charismatic Vince McMahon in front of the camera. But no, he does seem like he has never talked to human beings before. It's hilarious. It's but he's so like it's like he puffs up his chest and then he lets out this voice that is not his voice. I don't know
what.
Yeah. Welcome to
everybody to Dynamite. Yeah.
He did this. We were waiting to go to Rampage, and so he's been doing, I don't know if you've heard this from anybody else, any other on-site correspondents, but he does this bit about Time Cop, about, you know, we're gonna travel through time. It's his favorite movie, and you know, we're filming Rampage tonight, but it's going to be on TV on Friday. So like, this is just like the movie Time Cop. I'm like, this is not like the movie Time Cop. Like, it's ridiculous. So it's
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know, man. He I didn't meet him, but I've never met a billionaire before. But I bet they're kind of like that. Like, I don't think he's unusual for a billionaire.
I think I think every billionaire is unusual in their own special way, and Tony Khan is uniquely different. The thing with Tony is people who are like, who have communicated to me in that company about, on and off camera, about being driven nuts by him and being so infuriated and frustrated with him, and him talking over them and not hearing them, or, you know what? I mean, it's a whole array of things. They all go, oh, but don't get me wrong. He is a delightful, great person. I love him as a person, but as a boss at this moment, he's driving me mad. But like, people like just really, I mean, not that Tony, there's issues of accountability and self-awareness and excuse making. I mean, nobody's perfect. We all have our moments, and, you know, that we wish we could redo it, but people think Tony's a good guy. Like, that's the good part about supporting AEW, is all the things you're saying about his awkwardness on camera and all the criticism and anything. People just go, but people who are around him just go, he is just genuinely a good dude. And he's genuinely a passionate wrestling fan. He's just hard to steer, hard to get him to pause, to listen, and then to look like he processed what you told him and wasn't just planning the next thing he's going to say as he filibusters, you know, the rapid thoughts going on in his head. That's why he's able to do so much, but it does frustrate people who are trying to have a collaborative process with him. But that is funny, like in front of the crowd. I mean, the way that.
Can I ask you a quick question about Tony? Like, in your opinion, is he, as far as like, he's a billionaire, but it's like, as a businessman, is he like a ruthless, cutthroat businessman? Because AEW almost seems like a charitable endeavor for people like me who grew up on ECW and just wants to see dream matches.
I don't think there's an easy answer to that. He is a numbers person, and he wants AEW to be profitable and make money and succeed. So in that sense, he's not just a Money Mark fan. Like, he doesn't qualify for that. But Ruthless, I mean, I think obviously he's got issues with Paul Levesque, and he's, you can tell he gets really worked up when he talks about the competition. So
he's competitive. Yeah.
But I mean, Ruthless, I mean, does Ruthless, I wouldn't use the word ruthless with him, but I would say a passionate, strategic in sort of high energy, but not always, I don't know, well planned out way. But I mean, I haven't heard a lot about what he's like meeting with corporate executives. You know what I mean? Like, is his enthusiasm contagious and infectious, or is it overwhelming and annoying? Like, I don't know what people say when he leaves the room after a meeting. I know I've heard Paul Levesque is super impressive at corporate meetings. Like, he'd walk in, and the idea when he's meeting with non-wrestling people is, oh, here's the big muscle guy who's the next world champion. He's going to sit there and say something dumb or not say anything at all. And he just, like, really impresses people with choosing his moments, in economy of words, understanding a good follow-up question, bringing up topics that are on task and on target of a goal they're trying to achieve. I have not gotten that insight on Tony meeting with non-wrestling people.
Yeah, I only ask because, like, I don't know, it seems irresponsible to come to Fairfax, Virginia when you run an NFL team and, like, you have other things to do. It almost seems like, I mean, I asked if he was, like, just, like, surprisingly a ruthless businessman, because it almost seems like the opposite. It seems like, brother, you have work to do. There are things that you have to do. You're over playing with your wrestlers, and
no, he wants. He's a big kid with a lot of action figures. I mean, the highlight of his week is being at TV and sitting on headset and watching wrestlers wrestle. That's more than the business side. I mean, the business side is important to him, but he loves being at the shows.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Ramen, anything else you want to share from your experience tonight? Anything about that off-air happenings, or anything surprise you or disappoint you or impress you about seeing AEW in person? And we'll end on that.
Anything surprised me? Let's see. I don't know. It was just really interesting. Like, I've been to a lot of WWE shows, and a WWE show, like, I took my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, and she was a casual. She had really no interest in wrestling. It seemed like a lot of the crowd did. It seemed like the type of person who would go to a WWE show is just the type of person that would go to a show. And it seemed like this was about as big a wrestling crowd as I've been to, where everybody was focused on the wrestling and they were there because they were passionate about it. So it was really cool on that. I think that was the initial reason for me even speaking up today. But other than that, everything was pretty much as expected. Besides the things that I mentioned, I'm sure something, like I said, I'm pretty tired. I'm sure something will come to my mind, and I will email you guys. I'm first time, long time. I've been listening to you since you did the podcast with Stone Cold, and I've been a VIP member ever since. Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so obviously a big fan of both of your work. Obviously his work is different than yours, but I've been following for a while, and I listen to everything that you do, and I always want to communicate with you guys, but I haven't done it before, so I'm going to start doing it more often. So I think I'm going to send an email for you and Todd this week, and maybe I can ask some more cognate questions, right? Yeah, and concise questions for sure. So
it took a little cajoling to get you to call in, because I know you're tired and you're like, I don't know if I can get set up in time and all that. But I'm glad you did.
And I'm under an alias too. I didn't want to expose my face. I didn't want
to. Too late. Your camera's on if you didn't know.
That's what a ramen noodle looks like.
So no, and I love meeting. You see people, you interact with people in a chat or in an email, and the thing about YouTube is great. You see body language in addition to the voices that we've had on the call-in format forever, and it's great. It's great seeing the animated responses and the dynamic with everybody at this point. So I'm glad you called in and you gave us some good insight into the show tonight.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll try to like I said, I'll try to be a little bit more active in the community. I really love all of your work. All of the content, it scratches every itch. So
Cool.
I know I pushed back on a lot of your criticisms today, but no, I love them. I dig them. You give me things to think about that I typically don't. So,
and I have opinions, but my opinions change and get augmented by people who articulate a opposing point of view and do so, with passion and back up their arguments and stuff. That's why I enjoy having such an array. Like, this isn't a knock on people who work with the same person all the time as co-hosts, but I think there's something for me that I really get out of like every show. Like, I have somebody different on, and sometimes I think when I'm done with a show like Monday night with Kevin Duncan after Ron, I'm like, what would that show have been like with Zach Cadorn or Darren Lilly, or like how would that show gone differently with a different personality? What would we have stressed and all that? And so I love that not only, the call-in format and the email and the chat room is great, but the just the wide array of people that I work with throughout the week doing shows with, Greg Parks and Rich Fan and Todd Martin and on and on. It just, I think it sharpens me, or it at least humbles me sometimes, where if I was just talking to if Joel and I just were I only talked to Joel about AEW, I mean, I don't think my analysis would be as sharp. And that's no dig at Joel, because having him in the mix helps my analysis.
Yeah, Joel's great too.
There we go. Takes a lot into consideration. But I like talking to different people with different points of view. And you've added to that in the chat room, and your pushback is good, and it's great having you on.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, thank you. Thank you for the offer to come on.
Absolutely. Sure. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon. Appreciate your
Go
support.
VIP.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, Ramen.
All right, let's zip through some emails and we'll call it a night here. And we'll start with Ryan from Winnipeg again. He goes, "Hi, Wade, just sending a quick email to praise AEW for the continued planting of seeds for storylines and programs to come. Last week, I praised them for the same thing, and it was great to see them continue to build for the future while laying out immediate plans a la MJF versus you say Hechicero well, I think.
Hechicero?
Hechicero. Okay. Mm-hmm. Do you think you're doing that right? Because I want to emulate you if you do.
I hope so. Okay. I think so. I mean, I took so many years of Spanish, Wade. It's just amazing how much stays with you, but then so much leaves you. So
I'll default to Todd on Thursday then, because he's always picking on. Well, not you can't pick on my Spanish. That's overstating my Spanish. It's my pronunciation as it goes. Anyway, Hechicero and MJF at Forbidden Door, and then later teasing MJF and Ospreay interacting with each other, presumably planting the seed for a future feud. I don't like all the wrestlers are highlighting, such as Roderick Strong, Kyle O'Reilly, and Trent Beretta, but these last two shows have at least felt purposeful, with an obvious direction pushing forward rather than just random throwaway matches. Any thoughts? Thanks, and have a great night. This is, again, I talk about getting different perspectives and hearing from so many people in it. It's and by the way, I want to emphasize too, the chat room is great, but I wouldn't want only the chat to be the feedback we get. Like, I think people sitting down and typing out emails with, like Ryan just did, he could not accomplish that in a chat. But the instant reaction to stuff in the chat can't be accomplished in an email, because it's someone sitting down and writing an email and then waiting for us to get to it. Same with callers. It's just like this variety and this media format is great. And so he's making a good point, which is something we haven't brought up yet, which is, I do think it's an improvement on Dynamite, which is, criticism of bringing up blood and guts before Forbidden Door. Okay. And I think there's room for that critique, but there is a lot going on right now where there's the main thing we're talking about, but there's this undercurrent of things coming up next and next and next. And certainly the MJF Ospreay stare down at the same time that MJF had a match with Rush and now has a match set up at Forbidden Door with Hechicero. We're like, there's a lot going on, and we can handle it. Like, we can handle, there's a thing that just happened. There's a thing that's going to happen next. And now we're planting a seed for something for later this summer. And I do like that layering. I think more often than not, that's good, and the audience can handle it, especially if it's going to be a payoff down the line.
Yeah, you always have to have multiple different things going on that are going to have different endpoints or get to that next chapter at a different spot, because in some ways, when they just had the 4 pay-per-view format, it was that everything would build to that one pay-per-view. They blow everything off there, and then it was like starting from scratch again, and then you had a while until you build up to that pay-per-view. I think some of the criticism for the Blood and Guts is that it's a stipulation, and it's supposed to be a big blow off to a feud with the stipulation. And so, announcing that at that point that they did, just doesn't make as much sense in the storyline wise. And I just don't think you're getting as much bang for that with the Young Bucks coming out and announcing that they want to go up against a team AEW. Whereas I think if you had naturally built up a team of AEW going up against the Elite, I just think it would mean a lot more there. But certainly, I mean, I think that it's been a big improvement within the booking, is that it's not just everything leading up to the one show, is that you can have things happening at different points. And as I mentioned before, teasing different matchups that maybe you're not going to go to right away. Maybe it could be a couple months down the road, but certainly you want to get to it at some point and not wait, a year or more to get to that match if you're teasing that on television and it's not just speculation online. But I think that's good because that gets the conversation going, it gets people excited. It gets people to think about those different possibilities. And then that's where you just fill in with the stories, and the announcers can fill in on talking about those different possibilities and matchups that can come up down the road.
Very good. From the land of Lincoln, to have Nyla Rose, who was on a nice ROH run, get put in a position where she was obviously going to lose to Statlander. Did they even try to build Rose up? In my opinion, that didn't help Rose or Statlander. I was thinking that watching. Like, Nyla Rose just thrown into a tournament, no build. It was a weak point of the show. Nyla Rose deserved better. In a way, and it makes sense to say, wait, did Statlander get everything out of it by not building up Nyla Rose first? How did Nyla get in the tournament? Why are they in the tournament? What, where have they been? It just felt like if you weren't aware of what she's doing in ROH, it felt like, I remember when she was a top star and now she came back for one match and lost and they swept her out of the ring. And that's it.
Yeah. This was throwing a bone to Nyla Rose to get her back on television, to get something out there for her to be on TV. And certainly I don't think it really helped her much, because you just are like, oh yeah, there's Nyla back on TV, because the story was all about Chris Statlander and her recent turn and her partnership with Stokely to get back at Willow. And again, I just did research to see when was the last time that Nyla Rose was on TV. And her last AEW TV match was on October 4th, 2023. And that was in a losing effort, tagging with Marina Shafir against Hikaru Shida and Chris Statlander. So it has been quite a long time since we've seen her on the AEW. Yeah, I mean, it felt like a long time, but honestly, it just felt like, hey, let's just give something to Nyla to get her out there. But there's no build for it because they were just getting to the next point, which is obviously having a match between Willow and Chris.
Yep. All right. We're kind of racing through these because we're past 2 hours here by far. Ed in High Desert, California says, evening, Wade and Joel. Curious what you think about the layout of the show. I argued to have MJF Roosh as a main event with videos hyping each wrestler and what little build they had. It would mostly be about MJF getting rejuvenated, training, working out while hyping Roosh and his overall accomplishments. Start the show with the women's tournament match, and then afterwards drop a video on the brief history of the tournament on the women's side. Why the tournament is named after Owen Hart, and what's at stake this year. Title shots at Wembley, which would lead to selling the men's side. I understand pushing back against video packages, but they could be short, 30 to 60 seconds. Well, 60 seconds is a long video package. I would say 15 to 30 seconds is where your sweet spot is. But for something that really matters, you can go longer. And maybe I'm overstating. 60 seconds is a long time, but I mean, anyway. Sprinkled with a couple of longer ones. Yeah. So he's even making a case for longer ones in 60 seconds, but that's 60 seconds is a long time. My simple argument is let's sell the main event, the wrestlers in it, and start selling the tournament and setting up that it's important, which hopefully translates to more interest in other shows. Thanks for the content. Enjoying the change to YouTube. Go VIP, everyone. It's a worthwhile investment. Thank you, Ed, for that plug. Absolutely the best way to support us is to become a VIP member, and you'll get a lot in return for your money. pwtorch.com/govip. You can sign up through your Apple account on your iPhone to get all our VIP shows. You can sign up through Patreon, get access on Spotify that way. You can also sign up through our main site, credit card, debit card, or PayPal, and gain access to over 35 years of archives of hundreds of retro radio shows for the 90s, including ones I hosted in the early 90s on KFAN. There's a lot of cool stuff there. The stuff that Ed lists in this email, Joel, I think is a good point. There's always I rarely think AEW gets everything they can out of what they put on TV. And so if you're a hardcore AEW fan, you're watching all their stuff, you're enjoying the live experience. You can't believe you're seeing Will Ospreay in person. You just, any show that has the array of talent that they have and there's favorite characters you love, you're going to enjoy it. But they didn't get the most, even out of MJF Roosh, which I think gets a better than average grade in terms of the build, given Roosh hasn't been a central character for the show. And, they did a little thing with Don Callis and him throwing a tantrum afterwards. They get points for that. There was actual follow-up on a loss, the agony of defeat. I liked that. MJF gets pivoted to something else. I mean, there was a lot of good there, but they want to start the show with MJF wrestling, commercial free. That was a pitch to get people to tune in at the beginning. So I get that strategy compared to starting with, Nyla Rose and Chris Statlander, which isn't it's relatively speaking, not as good of a way to start the show. But I get what Ed is getting at when it comes to, there are things I look forward to watching that a video package can elevate my interest in it. A basketball game, football game, whatever. Like, I'm not one to watch a 1 hour pre-show on sports usually, but the few minutes before a game starts, announcers enthusiastically setting the stage, reminding me or informing me about the different key players and the history and what's at stake, that does get me more geared up. I don't fast forward past that when I DVR a sporting event. I like the stage to be set. I like people who have spent all week thinking about it, talking about the players, know the sport better than I do, conveying excitement and context. And so I do think AEW could do a better job of that. I talked about Ospreay Swerve and talking about the different paths they're on and how the announcers should do a better job. This did feel like they did a lot, but they kind of rushed through some of it too. Joel, your thoughts on what Ed had to say?
Yeah, I mean, I got a number of things to say on that. I'll start with like the announcers part of it is that, there's often times where I think that when they want to dial in and make stuff important, they can. But there's too often when I'm watching an AEW show that the announcers just feel like, all right, we're going to sit back and watch 2 hours of wrestling. We got a lot of stuff here for you. I mean, especially when I'm hearing Tony Schiavone on Collision Show. I mean, that's where you can just kind of tune out a lot on the commentary. I mean, there's some good stuff with Nigel McGuinness, but you're just not getting as much out of that, where it just feels like it's more about the camaraderie and having a good time, kick back, listen to this wrestling. Excalibur's got a lot of stuff to plug there. Whereas I feel like there could be a better job of maybe producing the announce team to telling those stories and getting them into those directions, of things that of the stories that you want to tell better. And again, when people are listening to the commentary team, you can plant different seeds and different ideas without being super cryptic or hitting them over the head with it. You can be more just genuine and authentic doing that. But you make the point too, Wade, that it's like you just don't seem to get as much stuff out of the stuff that you're presenting on Dynamite. And Greg Canner on the All Elite Conversation Club always makes the point of, whatever's the main event, like I want them to be plugging that at the beginning of the show. I want them to remind you to stick around and see that in the main event. Whereas on this show, you had 2 of these Owen Hart tournament matches, and they were just kind of fell flat at the end, that there wasn't really a lot of buildup for it. It was just kind of more like, oh yeah, that's still on the card. That was on that graphic I saw on Twitter, that they still got to fulfill those matches, that it just didn't have the same feel for it, even though they did have some video packages with Claudio. You saw him do a little build up there. It just, the placement of the matches just didn't feel exactly right for this. Whereas there's so many times where you just feel like there's strategies being done for ratings wise by having MJF's first singles match going on first at the beginning of the show, versus, making the show feel the most important. So trying to hold on to that viewership at the beginning, and then you can just let things kind of, fall into place from there or trickle down as they typically do. Whereas I feel that you could just build things more in a way to lead to things that are feeling more important than just, always trying to hold on to the viewership at the beginning of the show.
Yep. All right. Next, and we'll wrap up with JB from Detroit. He's got multiple points here. The crowd was certainly hot for MJF and remained into the match throughout. It's good to see that MJF is still insanely over. Did you think MJF was insanely over? I think, we had some comments from on-site correspondents and there's some Roosh chants, and I don't know. I mean,
didn't seem that way.
Yeah. I mean, he's over, but yeah, it didn't seem like insanely over to me, but I don't think he should be like like super concerned, like, oh,
No.
nobody cares, but it's not. I think there's some damage, and sometimes he needs to recover a little bit. And yeah, I think he's still. It's weird to say, but I still think he's trying to find himself, because he's been all over the place for a couple of years. And yeah,
Yeah, it's trying to like find that right lane for him where he does some of that, at the beginning of the match, he did some of that shtick of, where he kind of does that Rick Rude pelvic thrust, and, he's still having fun with it, showing his personality. And I'm okay with that to a point, as long as we don't go back to the kangaroo kick and some of the other just funny haha stuff. That I think a more serious MJF, but he could still lean on some of those more kind of heel tendencies that people like, and that I think that can still be a baby face, when it's done in the right context and against the right opponent. But yeah, I didn't think that it was this massive reaction that you would expect for him, especially the second time he came out there, that you would expect, hearing his music hit when all this stuff's going down, Will Ospreay's in the ring, that boom, that should be a really big moment. And it just felt like it didn't hit as much as it should have. Whereas I felt that Ospreay's first time coming out against Swerve Strickland, still felt like that's that's still the biggest pop, and people are most excited to see him and hear that music, and then see what he's going to do in the ring.
Zero, an adequate opponent for MJF at Forbidden Door. He seems like a step down from Roosh. That being said, I do understand the spirit of Forbidden Door, and MJF is still getting his feet underneath him, coming back from an injury. So I'm actually okay with this direction. Hopefully, there's an angle at Forbidden Door that will propel MJF into a bigger storyline. Well, I think we got that angle that later in Dynamite. But yeah, Hechicero is. I mean, it's just a filler match on a pay-per-view, which is kind of weird. But I guess on Forbidden Door, it's not damaging because it is, like JP says, it's the spirit of Forbidden Door.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world. My understanding is that Roosh can't be on the Forbidden Door show just because of his, how things went down with CMLL, which was very public with him and his brother, Dragon Lee, that, things did not end well there. So they had to have a blow off for this match to be on television. And so then they also want to have MJF on the pay-per-view because he is one of the biggest stars. And so, this is just another one of those novelty matches where you're interested to see how does MJF do against Hechicero in this, just like Mercedes going against Zeuxis last week. It's just kind of this interesting, how are they going to do? You didn't expect to see these. And again, that's appealing to even a smaller amount of people than I thought, because when we talk about, the insider fans, a lot of these people, those types of people are watching this YouTube stream, and you're hearing from those same people that it's also not getting them excited about ordering this pay-per-view and paying more money to see that. So it's curious that I think it's an even smaller segment of the audience than we had thought before, that cares to see a lot of that stuff when you're not building it up, and it's more just the novelty of seeing these two very different wrestlers going against each other, and seeing how their styles are going to work with one another.
The fact that Ospreay is still associated with Don Callis, and Swerve brought that up in his promo, is a bit of an issue, but I think Ospreay had a great answer to Swerve's criticism. Also, Swerve saying he doesn't have any friends with Prince Nana standing right next to him had me chuckling a bit. So I mean, I thought, okay, if you're going to talk about Ospreay and Callis being aligned, maybe that should be something you should be doing a better job of telling that story. Where does he stand with them? And Ospreay didn't go, well, haven't seen me with him in a while. We aren't aligned anymore. That was just weird. It's like a storyline that's sort of there and it gets referenced, but it never just reached any kind of not conclusion, but it's sort of like the Bucks and Tony Khan not being at shows. They just sort of forgot to really fully follow up on it, at least on Dynamite proper. And the Swerve thing saying, I left all my friends behind. It's like, yeah, Prince Nana, it's like, he's right there. He's right there.
Yeah, that was funny with having Nana right there. I mean, he's always kind of brushed off by Swerve. Even though Nana has always had his back, that it's just kind of that funny interplay between those two. But yeah, it's Yeah, for Swerve to say, he's got no friends and stuff. I mean, and then you have Will Ospreay talking about, his relationship right now with Don Callis. It's in a really weird spot. I mean, we thought when Will Ospreay was debuting at Revolution that they were probably going to get to the conclusion of him just separating from these people pretty quickly, because he was going against Takeshita, who's also in the Don Callis family, and then he meanwhile runs through everybody else in the Don Callis family. He goes up against Kyle Fletcher and Powerhouse Hobbs, and just starts running through all of these names. And they've just kind of lingered it on, while Ospreay's just kind of been on by himself and gone more of the babyface route. And it's all these things that we talked about several months ago, and now it's kind of at a head here, where it's like, what do they do with this? And we had the same conversation with Ramen Noodle earlier. That's like, there was a time where I was on the same show and I was saying, I don't know if this is the right time for Swerve to win this championship, because you are going to run into this problem. I brought up the same thing with Will Ospreay, that inevitably you're going to want to put him in a position to win the world title. And now it's going to be, do you put it on Will Ospreay now, because he is the guy that people are really getting behind, because he's super talented and he's just a notch above everybody else on the roster. He's great on the mic. He's not the number one guy on the microphone, but he's great on the microphone. He's a fresh face, who's brought onto this roster. But do you do that at the expense of Swerve Strickland now having a shorter title run, not having that legacy run? And as you made the point, if he loses this, then he becomes kind of the lower of all of those names who have held that belt. And so they've run into a number of different things that need to be resolved at this point. And that's what's happened, is there's a lot of these kind of big time storylines where it's really good angle, it's a good angle, gets people talking, but then how do you resolve it and move on to something that's even better?
Yeah. Ramen Noodle, still listening here, says, I think they want to preserve some semblance of this relationship until Kenny comes back. But boy, I mean, maybe so.
Whenever that is.
Yeah, I mean, but some semblance, like, what does that damage Ospreay to still like not disown Callis after what Callis is doing? That can hurt Ospreay's brand. It's like, I think it hurt Cody's brand to hit AJ Styles with the stairs after AJ said I quit, to avoid being hit by stairs. Like, I just think babyface should have higher standards than the heels. That's why I didn't like what CM Punk did, costing the fans an opportunity to see a regular conclusion to Drew and Priest. I think babyfaces shouldn't lower themselves quite to the depths of heels outside the confines of an actual match. With Ospreay, it's a smaller thing, but I mean, I think that should be something that isn't just not talked about, but it's there. It feels awkward to not be acknowledging that he hasn't disowned Don Callis yet. Speaking of which, I think Roosh this is still JB. I think Roosh is potentially a good fit for the Callis family, but I don't think that they should have added Trent so closely if this was a plan. And maybe shouldn't add him at all, because he's just kind of, mid-card. I understand that he's supposed to be the designated jobber for the faction, but the faction needs credibility in and of itself first. Yeah, it's a weird fit. I don't think they've done good follow-up on it. I think if you're going to put Trent with Don Callis, you ought to believe in Trent enough to really build him up as an acquisition, and they're just phoning that in, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, you have Don Callis, who is just an excellent manager. I mean, he is not Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman is great, and he is different at what he does, but he is the that version of that type of manager that you have in AEW, and you should make what he does special, like WWE does with Paul Heyman, where whoever he's associated with, they win. And he makes a difference other than just being, like every other heel manager of just, putting their leg on the rope and distracting people. That's all stupid stuff. Paul Heyman is more of this mastermind, who is an actual addition to that act, behind the scenes and on camera. And Don Callis has the capabilities of doing the same thing, but unfortunately, everyone that they put him with now has just taken a ton of losses. I mean, Takeshita has taken a ton of losses at this point. I mean, everybody, to where it's like, what does it really mean to be associated with Don Callis? How much does that actually elevate Trent at this point?
Yeah. Yep. Well put. Tony has a history of just pausing stories due to injuries. No point for the Don Callis family at all if Kenny isn't the target. This says Ramen Noodle. Okay, back to JB. I think that Roosh is potentially a good fit for the Callis family. Oh, I already said that. If Roosh does join, I hope that he, Fletcher, and Takeshita are elevated rather quickly. Same goes for Powerhouse Hobbs, but who knows if he's actually part of the faction or if the faction still exists by the time he returns from injury. Yeah. Okay. I wish the bracket for the men's and women's Owen tournament was a little bit bigger. The women's bracket looks fairly strong, but I wish the men's was stronger. Having Jeff Jarrett, a wild card, and a lower level New Japan guy on the men's side doesn't do it for me. And also, why does the men's side have a wild card and the women's does not?
Yeah.
Just because, right?
Just, it's just, again, more of the mystery, the pop, all of that, which has been a staple of AEW. And, I would just prefer more transparency and telling people to speculate on it, versus telling people versus having to have all the speculation and unknown with it. I just think it's more to their benefit to be open about those things.
I like the seeds planted for Ospreay MJF and Ospreay Garcia in the future. I really like that they're weaving Ospreay into the fabric of multiple AEW storylines, as it looks like he's being established as a number one babyface for years to come. Yeah, I think you can have multiple opponents at one time or multiple people on your radar. And you've got with Ospreay, you got Swerve, you got MJF, and Danny Garcia in the short run. Yeah, I like it. There should be lots of people talking about wanting to be champion. There should be lots of people wanting to be international champion. And if you're an international champion, you should be dealing with contenders, but also aspirations to be world champion. So Ospreay has a lot going on. And I mean, I don't think you'd want to add a lot more to that, but I think that's enough. The match, the pay-per-view match, another match on the horizon, and then the one a little bit further down.
Yeah, I mean, and because it's holding the international title, you'd like to hear more people wanting to go for that title as long as it's going to exist.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm advocating for less championship belts. I think the more that you have, they all mean less. But, I think more people should be talking about each of these championships to go for them so long as they're going to exist.
Yep. All right. And then finally, he says, I like the idea of having Pac beat Claudio as a member of the BCC to eventually face Danielson in the finals of the Owen. This plays on a motivation for Danielson to avenge Claudio and gives a bit of doubt as to whether they might have Pac beat Danielson to get Pac a moment in his home country at Wembley. So yeah, it was a main event match. That was a finish. Danielson on commentary, a bunch of leverage 2-count reversals leading to the finish, which led to Danielson going, hey, it's okay, it happens. And Claudio not really wanted to hear it at that point. Don't know if we should read into that or it's just realistic. You lose, agony of defeat. You don't want to hear somebody tell you it's okay. But to me, Danielson is still the most intriguing person in this Owen tournament to win. But the wild card, does add an element to it that makes it hard to really get a sense of the lay of the land and the options compared to how you can't compare Danielson winning to somebody we don't know.
That's exactly right. Whereas I think Danielson is a very strong candidate to win this, but without knowing who that wild card is, could it be MJF? Could it be Hangman Page? I think there's a whole list of people that it could be. But without knowing who that is, I mean, it's difficult to predict because I think you could see a scenario where, if Ospreay does win the title from Swerve, then you could see Danielson winning this tournament to go up against him, in his final full-time year against Wembley to have that really big match against Will Ospreay. But then if it was Swerve who retained the title, I could definitely see a scenario where Hangman Page returns and you do another big match between those two. Because I think that that the people have seen this story before, and because it's been so long since we've seen it, and now that both of them are at different stages of their career, where you could have Hangman more aligned with the Elite, and Swerve has now held the championship for several months, that you could you could do a cool story with that. But yeah, without knowing that wild card right now, it just opens up a lot of possibilities where it's hard to predict outside of Danielson for the people we know.
That's fine, but I wish the tournament had a better explanation for why people are in it. And yeah, just better. I mean, Jeff Jarrett, there's a lot of things wrong with Tony's tournaments. And I, was critical of who was and wasn't in the Continental Classic. I think you want to come out and just make it the absolute best top tier annual tournament if you're going to do it, and they didn't do it. And boy, did people have excuses and reasons. And I know some people, were hurt or they weren't available or what, but man, plan ahead. And if you're going to do something like whether it's Owen tournament or Continental Classic, if you're going to do a tournament, say have everybody available who you can as a top name in it, even if it means some tough losses. And if you have 2 or 3 or 4 top names who aren't in it, actually address it. Say they were offered the spot, but they didn't have a lot to gain because they're already in title contention, or they're nursing injuries and they couldn't go through a tournament. Like, just give us a sports-like reason. But it just, I don't know. I like more explanation, not less, when it comes to looking at brackets and going, where did this come from? Yeah. So
the other part of it too is, they call it the Owen Hart tournament, and initially it was for those belts that we just never really saw again, that went to Adam.
It's not for like 3 weeks.
Baker.
They carried him around for like
3 weeks. They carried him around for a couple weeks, and what's difficult about this is that it's like, well, Jeff Jarrett's in this because of his association with Owen Hart, whereas the emphasis should be, I'm sorry, less on Owen Hart. When the stakes are a world championship match at the biggest show of the year, your emphasis should be more on that versus the memory and foundation of Owen Hart. I think that there is a place for doing that where you can have that base in Canada, but I think you want to make it more important that this is less about trying to do the stuff for Canada, having Jeff Jarrett involved in this, and more about the best wrestlers who have had the best year are now going to be put into this tournament. You could do it based on the records. We still see the records, and putting them in it, and then going on to whoever wins to be at All In.
Yep. Awesome. Joel, anything else you want to add from tonight's show?
I don't think so. I mean, man, we were able to get to some of that stuff at the end there, with talking about the Owen Hart tournament matches. Yeah. I thought that the 8-man tag match, again, that's a lot. It's a very good match. Everyone's getting in their spots there. We didn't talk a whole lot about that there because they had a very similar match the week before. Trying to see if there's anything else.
How about the Mercedes Monet vignette?
Yeah, so Mercedes, she in these contexts, I think that she's better because it's just more controlled instead of in front of the live crowd. She talked about that she has no arrogance and that she has just confidence. And she said that the titles are not up for grabs, but they're for her to claim. She says a lot of those same lines that she's trying to get over, as well as there's a price to pay when you mess with Monet. I think it was fine. It didn't do much for me to advance this match between her and Stephanie Vicaire. But I think that Mercedes, when she is in a more controlled environment and edited video, that her character, seems to be have more of a direction versus when she's out there in front of the crowd, and it becomes more of that kind of WWE speak, and then can kind of verge into feeling like a heel at times in her cadence.
Very good. Yeah. Just quick thoughts from you on the Hook Samoa Joe dynamic. Where we catch them, like the camera's following them from behind as they chit chat about random things. It's an interesting approach.
I like it, then they had they gave the explanation that Shibata is the one who is actually filming them, so it's not just a random camera guy. So I did like that aspect, although it did still have the translator voice ready to go for Shibata, which I have not been a fan of. Although it's funny, I have not been a fan of it because logically it's, are you Stephen Hawking, where you're just able to have this you're able to look at it with your eyes and you're able to get that stuff. There's too much stuff that you have to think about for that. But I thought it was interesting that they go in there, and then they had already left a note in there that, I don't know. I mean, I thought they would have been smarter than that, but
I'm glad you brought that up, and I'll conclude with a criticism. How often do people barge into locker rooms in AEW?
I mean, not really ever. Yeah.
Is that a Joe Hook thing? Have they been doing that? I think the answer is no. I'm willing to be corrected. So how did a group of wrestlers abandon a locker room going, we knew what you were going to do? Like, there's no explanation for why they're like, oh, we're going to leave a note because we know Hook and Samoa Joe are going to barge in. It just, like, things should make sense, or don't do them, or do a better job with them. Yeah.
Yeah, how would they have known that they were going to barge into their locker room,
Exactly.
to then leave a note? That just, it didn't make a lot of sense to me on that. But I do like the pairing between Joe and Hook. I thought that the style they do it is good, but I just thought they got a little too cute by subverting your expectations of them not being in the locker room.
Yeah. I mean, they scared Mark Sterling in his locker room last week. So it might not have been, so it might not be as bad, because I'm thinking, because he was there, but his guys weren't. So maybe there's enough of that's enough of a precedent to give them a pass, to say, we anticipated you doing it again. Yeah, I'll withdraw any kind of stern criticism over that, because of the Sterling thing last week, now that I'm thinking it through. But still, yeah. Anyway, but the dynamic's fun. Hook is in a very different place as a character than he was before hanging out with Joe. But that's good, because I think they kind of did what they could with Hook talking in a weird voice and not really saying much. And there's a fun chemistry between them. So, yeah, cool. All right. Thank you, everybody. I don't know how this. The time flew by. Like, there's no part of my life that the last 2 hours 45 minutes that seems shorter than doing a show like this. It just flies by. It's been a blast talking with you, Joel, and our video callers, and the chat room and mailbag interaction. It's been fun. How you feeling about the Wolves? I see your hat.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm liking the fact that it seems like they're going to run things back, but man, the ownership situation is just such a downer of things to be excited about for next year. That I want it to be resolved, but the more I follow the story, it's like, well, it's probably going to be a long time, even longer than we thought. That
you've messaged me about that. You've messaged me about that. I'm like, I am just not paying. I've looked into it a little, or read a little, and listened a little, but like, I know that what you're saying like, what you're following some things really closely is just annoying. It's not helpful. And so I'm like, I could hit a button and say exclude ownership talk until it's resolved. Like, that would make me enjoy those more. So you've subjected yourself more to it. Yeah. And then Bloomberg getting involved and all that. I don't know.
The long and short of it is obviously Glenn Taylor has now said that Mark Laurie and Rodriguez have not fulfilled their deal, and from the beginning, and as this has gone on, and Glenn has admitted as much on radio shows after it happened, is that he has buyer's remorse, that he is that this team has, when he sold it at the time in 2021, he sold it for $1.5 billion. It's estimated now to be closer to $3 billion. His limited partners who are also invested with Glenn are upset at him, that at the time he sold it, that it was sold for undervalue. That 1.5 was less because Glenn wanted to sell it to somebody that he felt was going to keep the team in Minnesota, which he has used for 30 years as his selling point for people to, I feel, like him and get behind him at times, is that he's the guy who saved the Wolves from going to New Orleans at the 11th hour in 1994. So congratulations, Glenn. That's your claim to fame here. And so it's going to go to arbitration to review this contract, this agreement, this very unique agreement of a payment plan between Laurie and Rodriguez and Glenn Taylor, because Glenn, wants to be a part of the success that the team has been having, and he feels that his portion of it is worth a lot more. And he was asked about this on Chad Hartman's show immediately after the news said that he said the Wolves are no longer for sale, And he said, yeah, that is part of the reason here, is that he feels the team is worth a lot more money. They've been having some success. He wants to be a part of that success. So at some point during the fall here, they will have an arbitration where 3 independent people will have a hearing in person with Lori Rodriguez and Glenn Taylor to read through the contract, have their lawyers present. They will make their arguments, and then they will make a determination. That just has to be a majority of a 2-1. They don't need to have a unanimous vote of who's going to have this team. But Lori and Rodriguez are moving forward with their plans for the Timberwolves. I mean, they want to build a new arena. So it's considered the North Loop area here, but close to the farmers market, that they want to build a new arena, a whole new area there. They have Michael Bloomberg, the 10th richest person in the world, who is going to be a part of the ownership group here, and also investing into that area. They have the former Google CEO, Eric Schmidt, is also going to be a part of it. So for anyone who is saying that these guys were broke boys and they didn't have the money to buy the team, I mean, that's not even close to I never thought that was the case. And at this point, it's not even close to the case. But certainly they're going to need to win this arbitration case and then get approved by the Board of Governors, who Glenn Taylor is very close to, a lot of those people. So there's a lot of hurdles to go through. As far as the basketball end of things, I'm still optimistic and excited, but that's the long and short wait as to what's going on with the ownership.
We'll talk about writing it back and trade rumors and cat and all that another time. But it's always good talking with you, Joel. Thank you. I like Target Center. They don't need a new arena, but I know I'll love the new arena. But that refurbishing of that building, I'm still amazed at what they're able to do there, and I still think it's a good building. But I feel like I'm very much in the minority, and I don't want to debate that at this hour. It feels like home. Anyway, Joel, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Wade. Appreciate this. This was cool. First time doing this streaming. I'm looking forward to doing more of this. Thank you. That means a lot to me, coming from you on this. A lot of great comments from the people on the chat here. I really appreciate you guys listening to me here, and also listening to my show with Greg Canner, the All Elites Conversation Club podcast. We will be recording again this Friday, and those typically get released in the afternoon, evening this Friday. So if you like me, you're going to like Greg even better.
Search pwtorch in your podcast app or go to pwtorchdailycast.com. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.